Chapter 2017. Suppress Yale. The Silver Moon Ash Bear was actually very useful. His weight, his power, these were all crucial methods to suppress Yale. Yi Zichen's Emperor Star's starlight merely sealed the space around Yale, preventing him from easily controlling his divine power. Needless to say, the Five Elements' great emperor, he was just a bystander. Without the Silver Moon Ash Bear suppression, Yale could break through Yi Zichen's clone seal with his own strength. Therefore, it was just a short moment. Yale was free. His freedom would be a disaster for the entire galaxy. Big guy, what are you thinking? The Five Elements' great emperor roared angrily. The Yao Emperor charged towards Yale. He had to be obstructed. I can't let him, courting death. He slowly stretched out his hand and slapped out. The demon Thearka's face contorted instantly, and his head seemed to spin one round. Immediately after, he was sent flying 1,000 meters away. Yale! The Silver Moon Ash Bear roared. Actually, he wasn't brainless. He knew how important it was for him to suppress Yale, and he was also the clearest about Yale's resistance. Just now, he had already sensed that Yale's divine power was sufficient and was ready to break through the suppression. At that time, they would have to face the impact. It would only make their injuries worse. He could only lift his leg and try to break the seal around Qinglan. Even if they couldn't break through, they could still stall Yale for a while. His idea was good. However, in the current situation, he had become the scapegoat. Of course, he would not complain. He could understand how these people felt. His foot suddenly pressed down on Yale again. The huge foot descended from the sky, and the world around Yale darkened. Boom! His feet landed. Yale also disappeared from everyone's sight. It's done. The Five Elements' great emperor muttered to himself. Although he was worried about the Yao Emperor, he couldn't just ignore the situation here. Even if he stayed, it would be useless, even if Yale got Qinglan. He had to see it with his own eyes. The Five Elements' great emperor's heart was filled with anticipation to see the Silver Moon Ash Bear trample Yale under its feet. Roar! Suddenly, a deafening roar came from the Silver Moon Ash Bear's mouth. The Five Elements' great emperor saw. A long sword appeared at the foot of the Silver Moon Ash Bear. Fresh blood dripped down. It pierced through the sole of its foot. The roar just now was also the roar of pain from the Silver Moon Ash Bear. This empress was not paying attention at that time. Do you think that if this empress was on guard, you would be able to touch this empress's clothes? The Silver Moon Ash Bear slowly lifted its paw. The Silver Moon Ash Bear slowly lifted its leg off the sword and roared again. Before long, Yale walked out from under his feet. Silver Moon Azure Bear. It was the most unique existence among the extraterritorial divine races, primordial breaker behemoths. There was only one in the entire tribe, and it had been by Qinglan's side since it was young. An adult Silver Moon Ash Bear's combat power was comparable to that of a sovereign. His strength was even stronger than a god king's. However, due to his large size, his movements were much slower than a god king's. This was also why his battle prowess was weaker than a god king's. Its skin and hair were even tougher. Divine weapon. Touching its fur and skin would only result in shattering. This could be seen from the fact that he could catch Yale's purple energy cannon with his bare hands and come out unscathed. But now his foot was impaled. Oomph! With a soft snort, Yale grabbed his sword and stabbed it at the Silver Moon Ash Bear's foot again. This time, it nailed the bear's foot to the ground. After that, another long sword appeared in his hand. It was exactly the same as the previous one. Both feet were nailed to the ground. This empress forged this sword just for you. When I thought of how you were by Qinglan's side, I thought of this possibility. Roar! The bear roared. He tried his best to move his feet, but the sharp blade directly cut open his foot from where it had pierced through. It endured the pain of being cut open and regained its freedom. Then, a fist descended. I said I forged it just for you. Did you think there were only two? Both fists were impaled. The Five Elements' great emperor's eyes reddened. He could imagine the pain the Silver Moon Ash Bear was enduring right now. He was furious at himself for being useless. He was the Five Elements' great emperor, once the strongest person in all of history. But now, he couldn't muster any strength at all. He felt vexed. He was joking and talking nonsense just to make himself feel a little more relaxed. He'd been too depressed. Tens of thousands of years later, he'd become a good-for-nothing. Illusions. They had no effect on Yale. The five elements Dharma had no effect on Yale without the support of a higher cultivation base. He truly felt vexed. Even Emperor Dongwang, whom he'd always teased, was braver than him. Roar! The bear roared incessantly. Its hands were cut in half. Its feet were cut in half. It continued to roar and attack Yale relentlessly. It knew, if it stopped, if it was afraid, Qinglan would have no chance of survival. What the hell am I supposed to do? The five elements' great emperor roared inwardly. At this moment, do you need help? What appeared in front of him were two young children. There's fire and water in the five elements, right? Do you need our help? You, the five elements' great emperor, who'd already comprehended the five elements, could sense their elemental affinity. Your elemental spirits. He could actually see them. The five elements' great emperor had heard of the legends of elemental spirits when he'd roamed the world. They could multiply the power of the five elements Dharma. Unfortunately, they were the five elements of heaven. The five elements' great emperor possessed the five elements of earth. Even so, among the five elements of heaven, there were two elements of the five elements of earth, water and fire. At that time, he had been thinking that if he could obtain a water and fire elemental sprite. Just how strong was he? It was a pity he didn't get it until he died. After reviving, he found out about the Emperor Star-Lord. He knew that the Emperor Star had become someone else's, and he also knew that he had obtained the five elements of heaven. He was envious. She was thinking about when she could meet him. Unfortunately, it was as if he had been resurrected as a laborer. He had fought the god race for Ji Yuan. Now he was fighting the god race for Ji Yuan, and the one he was fighting was the god emperor. The elemental spirits wouldn't have the chance to see it. At this time, they had come and were standing right in front of him. Behind them, two more elemental spirits seemed to be giving Yi Zichen. Do your best. Why were there only four? Shouldn't there be five? Although he didn't understand, the five elements' great emperor didn't dwell on it. He had just heard the elemental fairy ask him if he needed help. Help? Could it be? How can you help me? Chapter 2018. Was this a dream? The elemental spirit actually told him that it wanted to fuse with him. Are you willing? Of course I would. This was what he had always dreamed of. Even though fusing with them would cause the earth, wood, and metal elements to be suppressed and disappear. From what they said, after disappearing, there would be no possibility of comprehending it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spoken so solemnly. He was also willing. Lost is lost. Right now, he needed power to stop Yale from obtaining the darkness divine spark. The only thing that could delay him until Yi Zichen came out was their battle. He lost the other three attributes. With his water and fire, he was still not a mediocre person. Even if he was crippled, didn't he have two powerful wives? He was willing. He was willing. He was willing. He really wanted to roar out loud, but he knew that the five elemental spirits belonged to the Emperor Star. If the fusion with him caused the Emperor Star's strength to be insufficient, then the Emperor Star wouldn't be able to handle it. Ouch. This seemed to be the end of certain death. Look on the bright side. If the Emperor Star would not be affected, then he would have to seek the Emperor Star's permission. Can I? To the Emperor Star, it won't. There won't be any impact. We're just helping you and fusing with you for a short period of time. After he comes out, we will fuse with him again. Sure, as long as the Emperor Star. The five elements' great emperor wanted to say something, but hesitated. He knew how precious elemental fairies were. Let's go. I also want to see how strong the five elements' great emperor's fire and water have become after fusing with the five elemental spirits. Yi Zichen laughed, then released the water and fire elemental spirits. The fire elemental sprite spread its hands. Are you willing? Your other. I'm willing. It had never been so urgent. Even when he was marrying the Empress and the rest, he wasn't as anxious as he was now. He really wanted to feel the support of the five elements. He really wanted to vent the anger in his heart. Then, please get ready and open your spiritual gate. We're going to fuse. Come on, let me see what other tricks you have. Countless swords floated behind Yale, and the silver moon ash bear's body was also covered with swords. Blood, the ground was drenched. Fiercer? Aren't you the king of the essence-breaking beasts? Don't you want to save Qinglan? Why do you only wave your fists clumsily? Use your brute force? Can't you forcibly abandon your arms and legs and use your teeth to bite me? Come again, get up from this emperor's sword. Silver moon ash bear, you're only fit to be a beast. Step on this emperor? Are you even worthy? Your limbs are the price you have to pay for stepping on this emperor. Roar! The silver moon ash bear no longer had the strength it had before. Perhaps he had lost too much blood, causing him to lose his strength. Or perhaps he was burning his lifespan and had reached his limit. It whimpered. It could be seen from its movements that it was trying to get up. However, a beast is a beast. Do you think you're human just because Qinglan calls you brother? Don't forget, your ancestor was only a beast that was ridden by humans. Forget it. This empress can't be bothered to talk to you. Let's end it here. The long swords on Yale's back suddenly rose into the air and turned into a rain of swords, continuously flying towards the silver moon ash bear's body. Bang! A ball of hot fire melted the long swords. Immediately, Yale saw a flaming shadow sweep to the silver moon ash bear's side, and the raging flames burned on its body. I'm sorry to have made you suffer. An apologetic whisper sounded in the silver moon ash bear's ears. It struggled to turn its head and saw a man who was burning with lust standing beside it. The fur on its body seemed to have been burnt, but the swords seemed to have disappeared. Leave the rest to me. You should still be able to move. Yes. Suddenly, the silver moon ash bear turned into a burly but wounded man. East Emperor Tai, the monster emperor who fought with us. He was badly beaten by Yale. Can you help me find him and take care of him? I'll protect your brother. Okay. Without hesitation, the silver moon ash bear set off. This kind of trust that came without any unnecessary words caused the corner of the flame man's mouth to curl up into an unnoticeable smile. It felt good to be trusted. At long last, he could be trusted again. Ahead, Yale watched as Tsang Xiong left. He didn't chase after him because there was no need to. He couldn't stop worrying about Qinglan either. Qinglan, this was the fuse that would ignite their war. Once he left, the others would definitely send Qinglan to him. If he went to retrieve his divine spark, these small fries would definitely get in his way. He could only deal with the small fries that got in his way. Only then would he be able to retrieve his divine spark with peace of mind. Moreover, the flame man in front of him was quite interesting. So you finally decided not to use those laughable illusions and fight me with the power of the 5 elements? The God King recognized the flame man, the 5 elements' great emperor. Even if his flames were invisible, his aura wouldn't change. It had to be said, this person's elemental Tao was quite impressive. He could melt the sword he'd painstakingly forged with a wave of his hand. Your flames amazed this empress, but since it's the 5 elements, can you let me see the others? As you wish. Boom! In that instant, the ground beneath Yale's feet shook. A waterfall shot up into the sky and pushed him up into the void. See burial. 8 water spouts appeared. This time, it wasn't an illusion, but a real water elemental attack. Caught in the water spouts, Yale actually felt suffocated. The viscous water stuck to his body, slowing his movements. The 8 water spouts buried him deep into the sea. Rumble. They merged together. After the sea merged with the ground, it disappeared from everyone's sight. Fire. Get ready. Have very clear. The fire elemental fairy chuckled. The 5 elements' great emperor felt indescribably pleased. This was the power of an elemental fairy. It could let him fight Yale directly, especially that water. No wonder the fairy seemed so lazy. Who would have thought its elemental attacks would slow down? Crack! Not long after, the closed ground was directly smashed. Yale charged out of the ground, a trail of rubble in his wake. Ha! No wonder I was amazed at how your power of the 5 elements could be so strong. So it's because of the elemental fairy support. Of the 5 elements, only fire and water are interconnected. Forcefully fusing a fire and water elemental fairy, giving up on the others. 3 elements, huh? Impressive. Yale laughed heartily. Chapter 2019. When a person had enough power. Their words and actions were filled with indescribable confidence. The five elements' great emperor was like this. As he fused with the fire and water elemental spirits, he could clearly feel how much his elemental power had risen. If it was the previous him, he had an affinity with elemental power and could use it at will. But now, he was the king of the elements. The elements bowed to him and obeyed his commands. This feeling was amazing. Unfortunately, the fusion only lasted for a short period of time. The five elements' great emperor had once considered keeping the elemental spirits by his side, no matter the cost. But he quickly erased this crazy idea. He was a senior, after all. Fighting over an elemental spirit with a junior was too embarrassing. He liked it. He should cherish his present. Then your empress shall wait and see. Let's see the five elements. No, now that you're just the fire-water empress, your empress shall see just what sort of experience the fire-water empress who is fused with an elemental spirit can bring to your empress. Yale sneered. The power of the five elements Tao lay in its five elements complementing each other, mutually reinforcing and countering. In order to fuse with an elemental spirit, he'd forcefully abandoned the other three elements. No matter how you looked at it, this was an idiotic decision. Even if fire and water could be raised to new heights, how high could they go? The water burial, just now, no, it hadn't hurt him in the slightest. You'll cry soon enough. He glanced at Yale disdainfully. This guy was too good at acting. Just because he had some power, he looked at everyone as if they were idiots. His self-righteousness. He deserved to lose in the end. The five elements' great emperor didn't pay any more attention to Yale. He couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. Before, that was because he didn't have the power and could only use words to stall for time. But now, he felt invincible. Fire. Begin. The voice of the fire elemental spirit, sunshine, echoed in his mind. The five elements' great emperor smiled and snapped his fingers. Rumble. The ground beneath Yale's feet split open again. Same old trick again. Disdain flashed through Yale's eyes. He suspected that this was all the five elements' great emperor could do. Otherwise, why would he always use such an opening? That's right, the opening wasn't much different from the previous water burial. But bang! The scorching flame was like the fire of hell, as if it was being suppressed, trying its best to release the flames that belonged to it, wanting to drill out of the crack. Not long after, rumble, right under Yale's feet, a volcano of boiling magma instantly erupted. The volcano was spewing its flames furiously. The scorching flames melted everything in the surroundings into water, turning the stones into the most heat-resistant sand. Water got it. The water elemental sprite spoke lazily. Not long after, dark clouds gathered in the sky above, and a heavy downpour poured down. Ha! Fire-water empress, are you trying to perform some acrobatics? It was raining. Water and fire are the most incompatible. The downpour completely affected the power of the blazing mountain's flames. It had to be said, when this flaming mountain appeared, Yale felt a burning sensation. But now there was rain falling, self-righteous. The five elements' great emperor muttered to himself. He had toyed with the power of the five elements for tens of thousands of years, and he knew better than anyone else how to counter and reinforce each other. Since he dared to do so, how could he be afraid of water breaking the fire? As expected, something's wrong. Yale's expression gradually turned serious as he laughed maniacally. The rain falling from the sky didn't extinguish the flames at all. More terrifyingly, the flames burned even more fiercely than before. In the blink of an eye, the temperature around the volcano rose by multiple times. The scorching heat from before was now a little painful. The sweat on his body fell like rain. He opened his palm and caught the falling rain, placing it in front of his nose. This was an accelerant for the flames. Not good. He couldn't stay here any longer. Before long, this place would turn into a volcano of purgatory. If he stayed here, it would definitely be traumatic for him. You want to leave? Too bad, you can't. Whoosh, four gaps suddenly appeared in the dark clouds above his head, forming a square shape that enveloped the flaming mountain and Yale. For pillars of water poured down like a waterfall. The waterfall fell on the ground, and the water fell into the lava channel of the volcano. The underground lava instantly boiled. The boiling lava kept sputtering flames outwards. No matter what it touched, it would melt in an instant. Yale, who had been about to leave, stopped. A seal. The purpose of these four waterfalls was to completely seal off the surrounding space while aiding the flaming mountain. Hot. It really was too hot. In less than 100 breaths, Yale felt like he was losing a great deal of water. If this continued, his divine power might not be depleted, but all the water in his body would evaporate. His lips began to crack, as if dehydrated. His throat was so dry that it felt like it was on fire. Enjoy the baptism of fire. He pressed down with 2 fingers on his right hand. The waterfall, the flaming mountain, and Yale all began to descend towards the ground. Yale was starting to panic. He wasn't even thinking about how much divine power he was consuming right now. His fists continuously slammed into the flat surface where the 2 waterfalls connected. Thump, thump, thump. A deafening boom reverberated through the sky, but the flat surface didn't budge in the slightest. It didn't show any signs of breaking. He could only allow himself to be sealed underground along with the seal. He watched as the ground above him merged together. That's what you get for showing off in front of me. I'll just burn you to death. The 5 Elements' great emperor swung his fists excitedly. This was too good. Previously, he'd been beaten like an ant by Yale. He hadn't been able to resist at all. But now, he could make Yale suffer and seal him to the point where he couldn't break free. Don't get too excited. You know this seal won't last long. The fire elemental fairy's words were like a bucket of cold water, dousing the flames of excitement in the 5 Elements' great emperor's heart. I know. I can't even be happy for a bit. Do you think we can be happy? Hurry up and break Qinglan's seal. That's the most important thing. Indeed, the seal wasn't invincible. The only reason Yale couldn't break free so quickly was because they'd shortened the time it could be maintained and increased the seal's strength. That was why Yale couldn't break the seal and escape at that time. And all of this, all for the sake of breaking Qinglan's seal. They'd taken away the darkness divine spark so that Yale couldn't fuse with his 5th divine spark. You guys really are a party pooper. He shrugged helplessly. The fire elemental fairy's words rang out. We're just doing this for the world. Good, good, good. I really wonder how the Emperor's Star managed to live together for so long. Chapter 2020. Qinglan was still unconscious. Knowing what Yale had done to him, the 5 Elements' great emperor understood why he hadn't woken up yet. It was too cruel. Yale had used almost every method of torture he could think of on him. He'd worn down his will. He'd knocked him unconscious and extracted his godhead. The Yao Emperor and 5 Elements' great emperor had been watching the situation outside the chessboard this entire time. If they'd been the ones being tortured, would they have been able to last that long? In the end, they couldn't. They admired Qinglan's willpower. Unfortunately, no matter how much the Yao Emperor and 5 Elements' great emperor grieved, they couldn't stop Yale from torturing him. All they could do was buy time. They had to appear just as Yale was about to extract his godhead. That was the best time to do so. If they came out too early, they'd lose the entire game. Flames gathered in his palms. There was no excess energy leaking out. All of it was concentrated in his palms. Their plan was to melt a certain spot. So long as the seal was damaged, it would be much easier to destroy it. This was the same principle as when Yi Zichen and the others attacked the God Realm seal. The water element had already left the 5 Elements' great emperor's body and lay lazily in the air. He'd always been like this. Even with Yi Zichen, he only merged with it when he needed to. The rest of the time, he was outside. In his words, it was freer outside, and he liked the warmth of the sun on his body. Breaking Qinglan's seal had nothing to do with him. Water. Mainly, it was sealing and healing. In truth, he didn't have many offensive methods. Fire was different. His entire body was full of attacks. Only fire was the most suitable to break Qinglan's seal. Not enough. The 5 Elements' great emperor's expression was solemn. He'd lost his previous smile. He was very careful when he released his flames, because he knew very well that these flames, which were enhanced by the elemental spirits, could instantly turn an imperial lord into ashes. Yelsil was very small. It was practically sticking to the edge of Qinglan's body. If he'd used his strongest flames from the start, he hadn't held back the instant he broke the seal. They didn't want to see Qinglan hurt directly. That big-eyed Song Xiong wouldn't let him off either. The Five Elements' great emperor couldn't help but shudder when he thought of Ashen Bear's physique. Song Xiong's strength was real. His strength was only borrowed, and after the elemental spirits left, his wood, earth, and metal elements disappeared, causing his combat power to plummet. If that big guy wanted to cause trouble for him, he couldn't beat that big guy. All right, the fire elemental sprite's tone was solemn as well. He was like this because the Emperor Star had said before that he wanted Qinglan to live well. The intensity of the flames in his hands increased. The Five Elements' great emperor controlled the flames to cover the seal once more. This time, the feeling of touching the seal was very different from before. The feeling now, the seal was melting. It was melting very slowly, but it was indeed melting. Just a little more. The Five Elements' great emperor, seeing hope, spoke up again. The fire elemental fairy furrowed its brows. He could also feel the seal melting. It was actually the best decision to break the seal like this. Don't just stand there, trust me. The Five Elements' great emperor said, my comprehension of the Five Elements is the fire element. All you need to do is lend me your fire elemental energy and trust in my ability to control it. If we keep it like this, it'll take too long. Do you think our seal can hold Yale for an hour? Then I'll trust you just this once. Don't worry, I won't hurt him. If I do, that big eye definitely won't let me off. I still want to live to see my wife. Whoosh! The flames burned even brighter. This time, even the wielder, the Five Elements' great emperor, felt the heat of the flames on his palm. It seemed like this was the limit of what he could accept. Forcefully enduring the pain in his palm, the Five Elements' great emperor carefully controlled the flames to cover the barrier. The barrier began to melt at a visible rate. They could see the melted enchantment turning into liquid all around them. As long as they maintained their current state, the Five Elements' great emperor was sure that they would only need 2 minutes to break the seal. Let me tell you some bad news. Suddenly, the lazy water elemental sprite spoke up. The Five Elements' great emperor, who was completely focused on the seal, was so frightened by these words that his hand trembled. The flames in his hand instantly shot up several meters high, burning off his hair and leaving him bald. Fortunately, the seal was still very stable and hadn't completely melted. Can you not be so scary? The Five Elements' great emperor didn't even pay attention to his bald head. What he was afraid of was that the flames would be too fierce and turn blue-silver into ash. Fortunately, he was still lying there unscathed. Oh, then I'm sorry, the water elemental said, still lying in the air. I just wanted to tell you that the situation has changed. The seal doesn't seem to be able to hold for much longer. What do you mean? The seal was made of water, so the fire elemental wasn't clear about the seal's situation. Only the water elemental knew. We might have underestimated his strength. Yale should be able to break the seal in half a minute. Hello. It looks like he only has 50 seconds. Can't you strengthen it? The fire elemental said. I'm already doing it. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on under the Divine Palace. The water elemental essence is very thin, so I can't stabilize the seal at all. There's still 40 seconds left. The water elemental said. You really... The fire elemental's tone was somewhat resentful. When the Five Elements' great emperor heard this, he only smiled. It's enough. As soon as he finished speaking, the Five Elements' great emperor's eyes narrowed. Fire? You're crazy? The amount of fire elemental essence I've given you is already the limit of what you can control. And if your hand is covered in more fire elemental essence, you won't be able to resist the burning at all. Your arm will say goodbye to you. The fire elemental was shocked. As a fire elemental sprite, he was very sensitive to such things. He knew very well what the Five Elements' great emperor could handle. I know that. It's just an arm. I could just regrow it. Doesn't the woman on the Emperor planet have the over-god of life? She'll regenerate it for me. Hey, you know that's not what I mean. I know. The five elements Great Emperor suddenly shouted. I know that even if I regrow my arm, it'll at most be a decoration, but are we supposed to give up now? Are we supposed to wait for Yale to come up, kill us, and fuse with the darkness godhead? Are we supposed to bring disaster to the world? We no longer have the right to choose. But your limit. Limit? Chapter 2021. Every second counted. This was the situation they were in right now. The fire element could break the seal Yale had left behind. Everyone saw a spark of hope. The water elemental fairy's words. Then, he pushed everyone off the cliff. Fortunately, they still had a chance. Just as they were about to fall into the valley, they grabbed the edge of the cliff with both hands. Come! The five elements Great Emperor roared angrily. Hero. He wasn't unfamiliar with this title. He just didn't like it. What was a hero? The extraordinary and outstanding humans were doing things that all living beings could only look up to and sigh with emotion. It was a title they sacrificed themselves for. He didn't like it. He'd rather live more selfishly. That way, he could at least live comfortably. But now, he was willing to do what he'd once thought to be an idiot. Of course, this might just be a momentary impulse. He might regret his decision very soon. Thus, he had to finish it as soon as possible. When that time came, it was too late for regrets. Then you better be prepared. Seeing how determined the five elements Great Emperor was, the fire elemental fairy wasn't a wishy-washy person. He didn't try to persuade him any further. He completely trusted the five elements Great Emperor's words. Support his decision. I've been prepared for a long time. Come, let me see how dense the elemental power of you elemental fairies is. ZZZ. All the fire elemental energy in the surroundings gathered in the five elements Great Emperor's palm. In an instant, there was almost no fire elemental energy in a 10,000-kilometer radius. All of it gathered in the five elements Great Emperor's palm. Elemental energy was like the best fuel for fire. It caused the flames in the five elements Great Emperor's palm to burn fiercely. The five elements Great Emperor's face twitched. He chuckled, seemingly nonchalant. Little did he know, he was forcing himself to do so. As soon as the elemental energy reached his palm, he couldn't take the burning sensation anymore. He couldn't help but moan. Of course, in order not to be noticed, he purposely chuckled. But this wasn't the end. The five elements Great Emperor knew that they didn't have enough time. Using flames to burn was too slow. He had to refine the flames. Only then could he break the seal in the shortest time possible and free Qinglan without hurting him. Just as the fire elemental energy completely gathered in his palm, the blazing flames shrank back into his palm. That was to say, all the fire elements within 10,000 miles were squeezed into his palm. His fingers twitched slightly, and then his entire arm trembled violently. The five elements Great Emperor gritted his teeth, not allowing himself to cry out. But the sweat on his head was like a bucket of water, constantly dripping down. In a few breaths of time, the five elements Great Emperor's hand was like red-hot iron. The skin on his palms began to turn black, and the blood vessels on his palms had dried up from their initial rupture. The fire elemental elf didn't know how to evaluate the man before her. The only thing he could say was, it was admiration. No, it was admiration. What's wrong? Is it because I'm so charismatic that you can't help but want to follow me? The five elements Great Emperor laughed heartily. He was trying to divert his attention so that he could relax. Unexpectedly, the fire elemental's reply was, following you might really be a good choice. Had he been confirmed? The five elements Great Emperor chuckled inwardly. He was even more certain that he had made the right decision. Being acknowledged by the elemental spirits was the greatest reward for him. Melt for this, daddy. He slammed his hand down on the seal. This time, the seal around Qinglan melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 2 breaths of time, a hole appeared. Water elemental. How much time do we have? The five elements Great Emperor asked as he melted the seal. But this time, the elemental spirits didn't respond. Worried about time, the five elements Great Emperor didn't pay much attention to them. There was no delay. He quickly moved his hand elsewhere. The seal continued to melt, and not long after, a crack large enough to drag Qinglan out appeared. Hurry! This was directed at the water elemental spirits. Only the water elemental spirits could drag Qinglan out now. 5 elements. Danger! At that moment, Dongwang Tai's frantic call came from afar. They had returned. Song Xiong was heavily injured. But Genesis Breaker Beasts were the strongest Break World combatants, so their self-healing abilities were obvious. Even if Yale's weapons were special, their bodies were covered in wounds. But a simple journey could still be carried out. On a hill a few meters away, Song Xiong found the East Emperor lying on the ground, barely breathing. After treating his injuries, he rushed back without stopping. Coincidentally, he saw what had just happened. Hearing this, the 5 Elements' great emperor turned his head. Only then did he realize he had been enveloped by a black shadow. This black shadow, it was none other than the previously sealed God Emperor Yale. His condition was terrible. There wasn't a single strand of hair on his body. He was naked, with only a pair of underpants made of some unknown material. Despite being burned by the mountain of fire, he still had his last bit of dignity. His head was bare. His eyebrows were bare. The hair on his limbs was bare. His entire body was scorched black. His skin had suffered some minor burns. In his hands, the wind, thunder, and water elemental spirits were gripped by their necks. They had lost all consciousness. Only the thunder elemental spirit could open its eyes slightly. Its wriggling lips seemed to be saying to the fire elemental spirit, "Run." Soon after, his entire head drooped down, and he no longer had any consciousness left. Second sister, third brother, fourth brother, inside the 5 Elements' great emperor's body, the fire elemental spirit howled. In an instant, the fire elemental spirit left the 5 Elements' great emperor's body. Tens of thousands of feet of fire burned the world. It did this because it knew the 5 Elements' great emperor couldn't withstand the power of its flames. This man, he'd given up enough. He didn't want his anger to affect the 5 Elements' great emperor too much. Plus, this was a battle between him and God Emperor Yale. Fifth brother, captured by Yale, his fate unknown. Second sister, third brother, and fourth brother were all in his hands, unconscious. He was their elder brother, the leader of the 5 Elements. He had to stand up and settle things with Yale for the sake of his sisters-in-law. In a few seconds, the fire elemental spirit in the flames grew from a child to a mature man that was close to 2 meters tall. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Yale in front of him. Chapter 2022. Whether it was the 5 Elements' great emperor or the sealed Yi Zichen, when they saw the fire elemental sprite's growth, they were all astonished. An elemental sprite. She'd actually grown up. Interesting. Did her rage at the sight of her brother's deaths cause the elemental sprite to mature? Yale laughed, then looked at the matured fire elemental sprite. Dead. When Yale said this, both the 5 Elements' great emperor and Yi Zichen doubted their ears. Elemental sprites could die without any hesitation. Sealed, Yi Zichen's star power surged madly. He disregarded all consequences and bombarded Song and Stone statue. These elemental sprites had followed him out, even though he'd initially resisted them. But as time passed, in truth, they were all adorable little fellows. The wind elemental sprite was timid, but she was a compassionate and brave girl. He'd seen her like this before. In Chaos City, for the sake of an old man who'd been bullied, she'd faced off against a fiendish man. Even though she'd been terrified, her hands were trembling, but she still stood resolutely in front of the old man. She looked at the strong man with her young face and clear eyes. The water elemental sprite was lazy. She usually spent 90% of her time basking in the sun. But when something happened, he could put aside his favorite sunbath and rush to the scene to maintain order. The lightning elemental sprite was arrogant. His pride made him think he was number 1 in the world, but he was also a little fellow brimming with a sense of justice. The lightning elemental sprite gave off a sinister vibe. Little did they know, he was actually the warmest of the 5 element sprites. Elemental sprites. They had character flaws, but they absolutely couldn't hide their strengths. Gradually, Yi Zichen began to like them, and they got along better and better. Even if they messed around with him, Yi Zichen was like an older brother. He let them be. When they had conflicts, he carefully mediated for them. They were elemental sprites, but in Yi Zichen's eyes, they were his little brothers and sisters. Just now, Yale had said they were all dead. Boom! The power of the stars surged. The deafening sound naturally fell into Yale's ears. Ah, look, your master of the stars is panicking. Knowing that these little fellows were dead, he seemed to be very angry. But looking at you, it doesn't matter even if they die, right? The fire elemental spirit grunted. How cold? Aren't you brothers? Aren't you supposed to be heartbroken? You two have lived together for millions of years. Yes, that's right. In an instant, the flames around the fire elemental completely fused with his body. At this time, only then did everyone see his face clearly. He looked to be around 30 years old and had a head of fiery red hair. His entire body was covered in armor made of flames. So, leave your last words. Haha! Bang, bang, bang. Yell casually threw the 3 elemental spirits to the ground. The fire elemental spirit only took a quick glance before withdrawing its gaze. Its eyes didn't reveal any emotion. You want to kill me? Forget it. Since you don't want to say it, then don't stay. For someone like you, even if you leave behind your last words, no one will fulfill them for you. Gee, an afterimage flashed. The distance of 100 meters between the fire elemental sprite and Yale instantly turned into a track of flames. The flames burned fiercely. At the same time, a fiery fist appeared beneath Yale's chin. Laughable. Yale crushed the fist with a flip of his hand. Just then, a roaring fire dragon appeared above Yale's head. The fire dragon spat out fiery breath. The temperature of the world was raised several-fold by this breath. Waves of heat were visible to the naked eye. What are you spacing out for? Take the darkness, godhood away. Suddenly, the fire elemental spirit's voice rang out in the 5 elements' great emperor's sea of consciousness. The 5 elements' great emperor hadn't forgotten about this. However, he'd been waiting for a moment when Yale was truly distracted. However, since the fire elemental spirit had sent him a message, he didn't hesitate. He extended his hand into the seal. Both his hands were severed. Blood sprayed out of the 5 elements' great emperor's hands like a fountain. However, the blood froze in midair. The seal had healed. You want to take Qinglan away? Did I agree? Seeing that your arm is probably crippled, I'll cut it off for you. Oh, right. Cutting off one arm is a bit asymmetrical, so I'll do it for you. No need to thank me. Yale chuckled. The godhood above his head flickered, then shone with a dazzling white light. Holy light instantly enveloped the earth. The fire dragon above his head was also purified by the holy light. 5 elements. Yao Emperor Dongwang and Song Xiong arrived by the 5 elements' great emperor's side. They looked at the cut on his shoulder. Before they could say anything, the 5 elements' great emperor laughed. When my brother-in-law wakes up, I'm afraid he'll kill me. You're still in a mood to laugh at a time like this? That arm of yours injured your soul. The Lich King's body can still recover. But even if you find a new body, you won't be able to use that arm, said the Yao Emperor angrily as he sealed his acupoints. When the 5 elements' great emperor heard that, he laughed bitterly. Of course I know, but I still failed. I gave up so much. I gave up on my other 3 elements, and I gave up on my arm. In the end, I still lost. Yale had broken free of his seal. Not only that, but he'd also taken the lives of 3 elemental fairies. Even if Yi Zichen managed to break free, he'd lost his elemental fairies and his strength would decrease sharply. Furthermore, the 5 elements' great emperor looked at Yi Zichen, who hadn't used up any star power. The emperor's star's radiance. But it couldn't be regenerated. The more he used up, the more he'd lose. How would he face Yale then? All Yale had used up was divine energy. Divine energy, it could be recovered. When Yao Emperor Dongwang heard that, his expression darkened. He knew exactly what the 5 elements' great emperor was thinking. They'd sacrificed so much. They'd worked so hard and sacrificed so much. All that was left was one final step. In the end, but it was still just barely satisfactory. Impossible. This was fate, right? You've already done enough, and we've done enough, said the Yao Emperor as he patted the Five Elements Great Emperor on the shoulder. Good enough? Is it enough? The Five Elements Great Emperor didn't know. If he thought about everything they'd done, was it really enough? Perhaps. In order to buy time, they'd done everything they could, but why? Even so, they'd still lost. Was this really fate? Was the future world really going to be ruled by Yale's brutality? Could it be? Countless eras of hard work couldn't overcome fate. Chapter 2023. Fate. Any expert would despise such an excuse. Fate was in their own hands. But if it weren't for fate, why would things still be like this? The first era was destroyed. The second era was destroyed. The third era carried the hopes and expectations of the previous two eras and received the support of many powers. Just as everything was about to turn around, they were walking the same path. He sighed. The Five Elements' Great Emperor looked up at the sky. He truly didn't know how to face all of this. It wasn't that he'd lost hope. He still had hope. It was just that, compared to his initial confidence, he now felt much more uncertain. The Fire Elemental Fairy was still fighting Yale. Based on the way they fought, it looked like they were evenly matched. From this, it could be seen that the Five Elements Elemental Fairies were truly powerful. Their strength was absolutely what the first era, or rather, the entire Milky Way galaxy needed. Unfortunately, right now, only the Fire Elemental Fairy remained. If they were still alive, Yi Zichen would have escaped his seal. The five mature elemental fairies would have had plenty of Emperor Starlight. Yale, there was nothing to fear. Forget it. These assumptions no longer existed. Their last hope lay in Yi Zichen. If he could break the seal, if the Fire Elemental Fairy hadn't been defeated yet, the two of them joined forces. There was still a chance. As for the others, the Five Elements Great Emperor, Yao Emperor, East Emperor, Silver Moon, Azure Bear, they were already useless. They couldn't break the seal around Azure Wave, and they couldn't fight someone at Yale's level. It was quite sad. There was nothing a few peak experts could do. Rumble. Raging flames raged. One could imagine the elemental power of a mature fire elemental fairy. 10,000 kilometers. It was no longer enough to satisfy his need for fire elemental energy. All the fire elemental energy in the outside had gathered here. Heaven and earth were suffocated with fire elemental energy, turning fiery red. The entire divine imperial palace had turned into a sea of flames. The fire elemental fairies attacked Yale relentlessly. Yale, he had always been able to deal with it easily. This ease was like a game, as if the fire elemental sprite's attack did not pose any pressure to him. Howl! Several more fire dragons roared as they approached. It was still the cleansing of holy light, and the fire dragon was directly purified. You disappoint me. Do you think you can threaten me with such a simple method? So what? The fire elemental sprite sneered, and several tens of fire dragons roared in the air. Of course, when the fire dragon landed, the fiery red color of the surrounding heaven and earth would fade a lot. This was inevitable. The fire element would also be depleted. I really don't know. The fire dragon was purified once again. Yale shrugged as he looked at the fire elemental sprite with a relaxed expression. Your fire dragon is of no threat to me. You might as well cooperate with that fellow who gave up on the three elements. I feel that his flame mountain is even more worthy of my expectations than your flame dragon. Is that so? In an instant, a roar came from above Yale's head. This time it was still 10. After that, it was purified. It was also at this moment that Yale's gaze suddenly changed. He realized something. Fire dragon. His attacks had no effect on him. The fire elemental sprite's actions were completely useless. But just now, Yale suddenly understood the purpose of his actions. Depletion. The fire elemental sprite wanted to use this method to deplete his godhead's power. That way, Yi Zichen would have a chance at victory. He knew, without the other elemental sprites, even if Yi Zichen broke his seal, his strength would decrease sharply. He could only use this method to deplete Yale's godhead's power. That way, Yale's power would decrease as well, and he'd be back on a level playing field. This fire elemental sprite, His thoughts were truly too deep. His earlier anger at the other elemental sprites' deaths was just a cover for his true thoughts. Calm, heartless. He was also far-sighted. If not for the fact that Yale had glanced at his godhead's brightness just now, he might not have noticed. Perhaps he wouldn't even have noticed. Purifying the fire dragon required far too little holy power, so little that he didn't even care. It was just that. Many a little makes a mickle. The fire elemental sprite here could be counted in the tens of thousands. That way, Yale's purification would waste a lot of effort. The fire elemental sprite wouldn't do that. He just didn't want Yale to notice. He couldn't mess around with him any longer. He'd used up too much of his godhead's power. This wasn't good news for Yale either. Roar. Just as Yale came to his senses, hundreds of thousands of fire dragons appeared in the sky. Their majestic aura. Visually, it was a huge impact. Yale didn't dare drag things out. Holy power surged out of his body. He knew he'd use up a lot of it, but if he ignored it, he'd suffer far worse damage than if he used up his godhead. Fire elemental sprite. The fiery red in the sky completely disappeared. The flames on the fire elemental sprite's body vanished. He smiled slowly, but in Yale's eyes, his smile seemed to be mocking him. At the same time, his body rapidly shrank, returning to the form of a child. A child. This was the form that used up the least amount of elemental energy. That was why elemental sprites appeared in this form. However, the fire elemental sprite didn't have enough elemental energy to maintain his adult form, so he had no choice but to shrink again. He was no longer a threat to Yale, and soon after, he walked up to the other elemental spirits. He gently leaned down and kissed their cheeks. After a long while, Yale finally purified the fire dragons. After purifying them, Yale's face was filled with exhaustion. However, when he saw the fire elemental sprite, even more so, he was furious. That annoying fire elemental sprite had consumed far too much of his energy. A fire elemental sprite. Huh. The fire elemental sprite looked up at Yale and laughed disdainfully. Instantly, his body disappeared from everyone's line of sight and transformed into a fiery red gem. Bang! The gem shattered. One by one, the fragments fell into the water, wind, and lightning elemental sprites' bodies. Then, another fragment floated off into the distance. Before long, the water, fire, and wind elemental sprites also transformed into gems. Off in the distance, a purple gem shot through the air and fused with Yi Zichen's seal body. He's using his own life to exchange for the lives of the other elemental sprites, said the Eastern Emperor. The five elements' great emperor's expression was cold as he gazed into the distance. Brothers, I think we might have a use for our skills now. Chapter 2024. The elements fell silent. They didn't know if the fire element had been used up or if it had self-destructed, but the fire element had vanished from the face of the earth. In any case, the fire element was gone. The other elements fell silent as well, as if in silent mourning. They silently mourned the sacrifice of this elder brother of the elements for their king. Emperor Dongwang and the Silver Moon Azure Bear immersed themselves in the fire element's actions. They didn't know how to describe his final sacrifice, but the five elements' great emperor's words interrupted their thoughts. What did you just say? What else can we do? The Yao Emperor's blood boiled. The fire element's self-destruction. It had given his brother hope of survival, awakening his long-dormant passion. At this moment, even if he were to deal with Yale, he wouldn't be able to. He wasn't afraid. At worst, he'd die. What was there to be afraid of? Do you have a way to deal with Yale? The fire elemental sprite used up a lot of his energy just now. If we work together, we might be able to take him on, the Yao Emperor said. Are you stupid? The five elements' great emperor deliberately lowered his voice. Even if we do you really think we could take on four godheads? I really don't know where you get the courage to fight Yale. I don't even have my hands. How am I supposed to bite him? Song Xiong didn't speak. In fact, Yale said that he was right. He only had strength, but his brain was not particularly bright. He was more suited to charge and break through enemy lines. Now, All he needed to do was listen to the five elements' great emperor and Yale's plan and execute it. Even if he had to fight Yale, he wouldn't be afraid. However, the five elements' great emperor didn't seem to be planning on fighting Yale. Did you notice where the fragments of the fire gem flew? The five elements' great emperor asked solemnly. I did. What about it? Emperor Dongwang said, there are five elemental sprites. Including the fire elemental sprite, there are only four, right? That's right. Those purple gems were most likely the elemental gems of the electric sprite. Yes. Emperor Dongwang nodded repeatedly. However, he still didn't understand the five elements' great emperor's intentions. Before we came, didn't you say that the god race had captured quite a few great emperors? Asked the five elements' great emperor. Qing Yin and Wan are among them. That's right. The demon emperor nodded again. This was the information he had heard before he came to the God clan. He had wanted to rescue them in advance and cooperate with Ji Yuan when he attacked from the outside. They were all great emperors. If they were to suddenly cause trouble within the god race, the outer realm god race would definitely fall into panic. It would be much easier for Ji Yuan to fight his way in. Unfortunately, the god race's territory was so huge that it made him feel despair. There were also a lot of experts in the divine race. It was impossible for him to wantonly check the location of those people. After that, since the divine emperor had taken the darkness godhood, he and the five elements great emperor had no choice but to stay here and wait for an opportunity. The matter of rescuing the other great emperors was put aside. Don't you think it might be, boom, Demon Emperor Donghuang's head buzzed? Why didn't he think of that? The five elements great emperor's words had truly enlightened him. That's right. The direction in which the lightning elemental gem came from might be the direction in which the great emperors were imprisoned. Given Yale's personality, he probably wouldn't be so meticulous as to separate the great emperors. In his eyes, these great emperors posed no threat to him at all. Capturing them might just be a whim. He would just find a random location to imprison them. Five elements, you really are a genius. Demon Emperor Donghuang's eyes widened, and he almost shouted. However, his joy didn't last for long. He frowned and said, but if we go and rescue them, what about this place? What about the darkness godhood? Is there any point in staying here? Asked the five elements great emperor. Do you think we'll be of any threat to Yale if we stay? No. If that's the case, why don't we go do something meaningful? Going there is better than being powerless here. With that, the five elements great emperor looked at Song Xiong. What do you think, big guy? I think you're right. Song Xiong was definitely the most concerned about Qing Lan here. However, the five elements great emperor was right. Even if they stayed here, they could only watch helplessly as Yale removed Qing Lan's godhood, unable to do anything. Rather than watching them despair, it was better to do something meaningful. See, even Big Guy thinks that's fine, muttered the five elements great emperor. The five elements great emperor muttered, and didn't you say that quite a few of the people captured had close ties to the Emperor's Star? If we go and rescue them, the Emperor's Star will have nothing to worry about. Otherwise, when the time comes, even if the Emperor's Star wins, Yale will use those people to threaten him. That's putting him in a difficult position. The Yao Emperor didn't say anything. His original intention was to stay here. No matter what the outcome was, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. However, he was moved by the five elements great emperor's words. That godhood, it's up to the heavens. The five elements great emperor shrugged. Even if Yale obtains the darkness godhood, that's the Emperor's Star's business. If I stay here and the Emperor's Star loses, I won't be able to see Qing Yin and the others. I'll have revived for nothing. Stop thinking about it. Let's hurry up and leave while Yale isn't planning on doing anything to us. With that, the five elements great emperor grabbed the Yao Emperor's arm and flew away, not giving him a chance to think. The Silver Moon Azure Bear followed closely behind. Just like that, they left right under Yale's nose. Little did they know, Yale had heard their entire conversation. He hadn't interfered because, to him, this was a good thing. Even if those people rescued them, they wouldn't pose any threat to him. But if they stayed here, although they wouldn't affect him in any way, he'd get sick of them, refusing to let him extract the godhood. Besides, no one knew when Qinglan would wake up or when Yi Zichen would break free of his seal. That annoying little shrimp had finally left. The Emperor's star, it was still sealed. From the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to escape for another 15 minutes. Yale's eyes were fixed on Green Billow, who was standing in front of him. He looked at the pitch-black godhood between Green Billow's eyebrows. If he fused with it, then no one in the entire Milky Way galaxy, no, the entire universe, would be his match. Yale, he would no longer be the God Emperor. He would be the supreme ruler of the universe. Yale couldn't help but rub his hands nervously. He carefully opened the seal. His hand, which was holding the darkness godhood between Qinglan's eyebrows, trembled. At that moment, he'd waited far too long. Finally, bang! Chapter 2025. He woke up. Qinglan's punch landed heavily on Yale's eye, sending him flying a few meters away as he tried to take away the godhead. Back then, there was only one thought in Yale's mind. He woke up. He calculated the time. Although many unforeseen events had occurred, it hadn't been that long since Qinglan lost consciousness. That kind of torture, anyone else would have long since committed suicide. But the fact that he'd persisted until he lost consciousness was already extraordinary. In such a short period of time, he'd woken up. What kind of willpower did he need to reach his current level? Could it really be that he'd tempered his willpower to resist the darkness Godhead's devouring? Damn it. Yale clenched his fists, his heart filled with rage. If it weren't for those guys, he would have obtained the darkness Godhead long ago. Why wait until Qinglan awoke? He regretted letting the five elements Great Emperor and the others escape. They should have just died. However, chasing after them was clearly out of the question. Yi Zichen looked at Song and Seal. Based on the extent of the statue's damage, he'd be trapped inside for at least another 15 minutes. There was still time. There was still time. Yi Zichen rubbed his eyes. Although that punch was sudden, it wasn't actually all that powerful. In truth, it hadn't affected Yale much at all. Yale patted the dust off his clothes, but didn't advance. Instead, he stared intently at Qinglan, or rather, at the darkness godhead between his eyebrows. Qinglan, I don't want to kill you. Yale took a deep breath, then looked at Qinglan with sincerity and internal struggle. You and I, we're brothers. Back then, no one treated me like a human. It was just you and Qingli. This empress will always remember this kindness in her heart. Give me the godhead. I won't let you die. I'll find you another godhead and let you live. Beside the seal, Qinglan didn't say anything. She just watched silently. The seal around him had already disappeared, but he didn't think about running. Perhaps he knew. There was no way he could escape Yale's grasp. Qinglan, I've already treated you well enough. Really, don't force me. Huh. A cold smile flashed across the corners of Qinglan's mouth. She suddenly twisted her neck. His neck creaked with a sound that made one's teeth ache. The disdain in his expression was displayed vividly on his face. Stop talking so much. Come and take it if you can. As she spoke, Qinglan actually made Huang Feihong's gesture and hooked her finger at Yale. Yale's expression changed drastically the moment he finished speaking. Then don't blame me for being heartless. Boom! The godhead above his head shone brightly. With Yale as the center, a majestic aura was released from his body. The raging wind turned into tornadoes. It swept through the world. Your godhead, I'm taking it for sure. Come on. Qinglan gently hooked her hand, and the ground under Yale's feet exploded. Broken rocks soared into the air, and a shadow appeared in front of Qinglan. Yale formed his right hand into a claw and grabbed at Qinglan's forehead. It was obvious. What he wanted was a darkness divine spark. He had always wanted to obtain that godhood. Bang! Qinglan waved her hand casually and pushed Yale's arm away. After that, Qinglan's arm wrapped around Yale's hand like a snake. Foshan's shadowless kick. Dong, 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 dong. Qinglan, who had bound Yale's arms, flew horizontally in midair. Her legs turned into afterimages as she kicked Yale's chest, sending him flying several hundred meters away. Midway, Yale couldn't stop spewing green blood, and some of it even landed on Qinglan's robe. TSK, TSK, TSK. Your blood seems to have mutated. She turned around and punched Yale's face. Blood and teeth flew out of Yale's mouth. Qinglan, come on. It was still Huang Feihong's signature move. Qinglan couldn't help but raise her eyebrows with a smile. Yale, who had been kicked to the ground, slapped the ground hard. He flew up and charged at Qinglan. Taiji Baiwa chain palm. Dong, 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 dong. This time, Qinglan actually used Taiji. She softly dispersed Yale's strength and slapped her palms at Yale's chest again. Divine Emperor Yale. No one knew what was going on. Facing Qinglan, he couldn't fight back at all. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and he fell heavily on the ruins of the Divine Palace. Countless clouds of dust flew into the air, burying him. Before long, rubble and debris flew everywhere. Yale stood menacingly in the sky. This time, he didn't try to steal Qinglan's godhead. You're not Qinglan. Yale was the Divine Emperor. Qinglan was at most a main god. The difference between the two of them was like a chasm between heaven and earth. When he'd captured Qinglan earlier, Yale hadn't even used half his strength. Now, he'd been beaten to the point where he couldn't fight back at all. Although he'd only used less than half his strength, this shouldn't have happened. Besides, Qinglan had been tortured for a long time. After waking up, he should have been very weak. His combat strength should have been even weaker than before. And his tone, the way he'd attacked, the technique he'd used. More importantly, he'd almost forgotten that Qinglan's first words contain a language he didn't understand. Qinglan laughed softly in the sky. She didn't refute Yale's words. You're Yi Zichen. Yale pointed at Qinglan and roared. The sealed Yi Zichen was still there. There was only one possibility for this to happen. The sealed Yi Zichen was fake, and everything he saw was an illusion. He suddenly condensed an energy cannon in his hand. It landed on the seal. When the energy cannon came into contact with the sealed area, it landed on the ground without any hindrance and blasted a 100-meter-deep crater into the ground. The seal ground. It turned into mist after the energy cannon exploded. At the same time, Qinglan's appearance gradually changed. A young man, a blue imperial robe. He put his hands in his pockets and smiled. Lord Divine Emperor, you're truly slow. I thought this sort of camouflage was useless against someone of your level. Wait, you should put it this way. Didn't you say that illusions are the lowest form of combat and have no effect on you? You're so perceptive, so why did you still fall for it? Huff. Yi Zichen took a deep breath. He was really fooled by the illusion technique. It really was you. Yale stared at Yi Zichen and completely ignored the mockery in his words. Chapter 2026. Rumble. Not long after they left the Divine Palace, the Eastern Emperor couldn't help but tremble in fear. What's with Yale's temper? Maybe he's fighting the Emperor's star. The Five Elements' great Emperor didn't even look. He simply extended his divine sense outwards. That's the right direction. Let's hurry. Wait a minute. You said he's fighting the Emperor's star? The Yao Emperor froze. Then his eyes lit up. What do you think? Why else would there be such a commotion? The Emperor's star's out. He's out. Soon after, the Five Elements' great Emperor told the Yao Emperor about how he'd used illusions to confuse Yale. That smug look on his face made him look as arrogant as a flower could get. Why didn't you say so earlier? The Yao Emperor punched the Five Elements' great Emperor viciously. In other words, it was the Star Lord's idea for us to go there? That's right. The Five Elements' great Emperor laughed heartily. When he saw that the Yao Emperor was about to attack, he hurriedly explained. Don't blame me. It's not like you don't know Yale's situation. If I told him back then, he definitely would have understood. Thinking back to the past few times, Yale had forced his way into their seas of consciousness and heard their transmissions. The Yao Emperor expressed his understanding. That darkness godhead. Song Xiong pricked up his ears. He was absolutely worried about Qinglan's situation. The darkness godhead. It's in the safest place Yale can't possibly find. Qinglan. Where on earth had Qinglan gone? Yi Zichen had created Qinglan, but Yale didn't care at all. He didn't care if they mocked him. Just now, he'd used his divine sense to scan the entire god realm. Nothing. He couldn't find Qinglan's aura. It was as if Qinglan had vanished into thin air. She'd vanished from the god realm, right under his nose. Yale had gone mad. He cared about Qinglan and his darkness Godhead the most. But now, Qinglan was gone. Speak. Where on earth is he? Yale roared, his eyes bloodshot. However, his threat held no effect on Yi Zichen. Why should I tell you? I'm going to kill you. In his fury, Yale attacked right away. Qinglan's disappearance made him lose all reason. Right now, he only had one thought in his mind, and that was to kill this Emperor Star in front of him. Kill him, then he would slaughter the entire era. He couldn't believe it. At that time, Qinglan would not be found. I wanted to say the same thing to you. Up in the sky, Yi Zichen instinctively glanced to the side. A lively child inexplicably appeared in his eyes. She followed on his right. Her hands were ablaze with flames, and she called out his name with a grin. There were also a few other elemental spirits. I will avenge you. Yi Zichen took a deep breath. Then his expression instantly darkened. He clenched his fists. I'll let you experience Chinese Kung Fu. Wind blew under his feet. He charged forward brazenly. It was dark above the divine palace. Explosions rang out incessantly, and dazzling splendor was reflected in the void like fireworks. Deities of the divine race, disarm yourselves and spare your lives. In the distance, the confrontation between Ji Yuan and the Outer Realm God race seemed to have come to an end. The ground was littered with corpses. As far as the eye could see, most of them were Outer Realm Protoss warriors. In this war, Ji Yuan had won an overwhelming victory. It was all thanks to the collapse of the Divine Palace that they were able to end the battle so quickly. The Outer Realm gods had lost all will to resist. Most of them died at the hands of Ji Yuan's experts without even struggling. A few stubborn rebels. Emperor Hades and the others easily dealt with them. Commander Bai Ning was captured. He was still lying on the ground when he was captured. Two Yao Emperor-level experts had discovered him. Given Bai Ning's cultivation, if he wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. But when he saw them, Bai Ning didn't resist at all. He tossed all his divine artifacts to the ground, sealed his divine sea, and left with the Yao experts. The god race ceased to exist. Most of the surviving deities chose to surrender. Ji Yuan, they didn't harm the ordinary deities. Even after they put down their weapons, Ji Yuan's butcher knives didn't touch their necks. A large number of Era's experts began to clean up the battlefield, detain the captives, treat the wounded. All they were waiting for was the Emperor Star's triumphant return. As for going to help, they wouldn't go. This was the Emperor Star's order, and they knew their limits. The God Emperor, how could they challenge him? If they went, not only would they not help the Emperor Star, but they'd also be a huge burden. Look at that day. Boss and Yale must have started. Go Yuzhan's beautiful Ahog swayed back and forth. He didn't even know if he'd been a bystander or not. At first, he'd captured a few outsiders. After that, Emperor Hades had taken care of all the commanders. He'd only killed a few generals before it was over. Now he was talking to Yinshang. Emperor Hades was there too, but he was angry that Emperor Hades hadn't left any commanders for him. Most likely, Yinshang nodded. Do you think our boss can win? I feel like those rebels are talking about Yale, as if he's a god, said Go Yuzhan. I believe in Yi, said Emperor Hades suddenly. Me too, said Yinshang. Big Sister Luer, what do you think? Go Yuzhan glanced at the icy Su Luer. Him. Su Luer's expression was as cold as ever. He can't lose. I think so too. Unfortunately, boss gave us strict orders not to go. Otherwise, I'd really like to see a battle between the very pinnacles. Go Yuzhan laughed, a look of pity in his eyes. All they could do was wait. Wait for victory. They firmly believed the Emperor Star could return in triumph. However, Go Yuzhan's so-called pinnacle battle really wasn't that pinnacle. Bang, bang, bang. Only the sound of intense collisions could be heard. Before long, a figure fell from the sky like a comet, then slammed into the ground. The outsiders. The earth was far harder than the epic. Even so, the person who'd fallen had smashed a 500-meter deep crater into the ground. It was at least 100 meters wide. Soon after, the other figure also descended from the sky. His face was bloody. His eyes were pitch black. His nostrils were still leaking golden blood. They were certain that the person in the sky was the Emperor Star, Yi Zichen. He slowly landed on the ground. As he did, Yale climbed out of the crater. His injuries were about the same. He'd only fallen because he'd been one move behind. However, the instant he landed, Yi Zichen suddenly clapped his hands, then pinched his nose. This scene gave Yale a fright. He instinctively took a few steps back, his expression vigilant. Scared now, Yi Zichen laughed in response. His words were a bit slurred. Chapter 2027. He clearly didn't have much of an advantage. Yet, Yi Zichen acted as if he'd won. He arched his eyebrows and beckoned Yale over. What he'd just said, it wasn't that he'd forgotten the elemental fairy's death or Yale's actions. That was something he discovered after the fight. Yale wasn't easy to deal with. That was all he could do to stabilize his emotions. Anger could temporarily increase a person's strength, but it would also reveal many weaknesses. Experts clashed. Victory or defeat was decided in an instant. Any funnel could be a fatal blow to them. Yale, the best example. Qinglan's death had infuriated him, and he'd attacked neither lightly nor heavily. He'd simply fought Yi Zichen head-on. But hadn't he been blasted down? Yale sighed deeply. He couldn't argue back. Although he hadn't lost anything, he'd indeed lost by mistake. As for Yi Zichen's clown-like words, he knew very well he'd done it on purpose. Be reasonable. With the godhead of emotions, his control over his emotions should be far better than anyone else's. But he'd never been able to control his emotions. Perhaps it was because he'd run into so many problems that he was starting to get annoyed. That was why his emotions fluctuated so much. Retreat. Retreat again. Yale couldn't help but shuffle backwards. It wasn't that he was afraid. He was just adjusting. Furthermore, Yi Zichen's Chinese martial arts made his scalp tingle. What Taiji Bawa Palm? Foshan's shadowless kick? Finally. And then there was that military fist. The way he saw it, these were crude mortal methods, but they seemed to possess some sort of magical power that made him wish he were dead. He had to adjust. He couldn't keep fighting at Yi Zichen's pace. If he was led around by the nose, he'd definitely suffer. Scared? Your Majesty, does my Chinese martial arts make you uncomfortable? I can't be bothered with you. Yale rolled his eyes at Yi Zichen, as if to say what he'd just said. How infuriating. He wondered if everyone in the new era was like this. The five elements' great emperor's tone and manner of speech were the same. The two of them were exactly the same. This was a duel to the death. It was a clash of the pinnacle of two planes. Let's not talk about how obscure and hard to understand the conversation between the two sides would be. At the very least, they should have the demeanor of an expert. What the F***CK? Was he playing house? From time to time, Yi Zichen would jump forward and punch to scare Yale. However, Yale did not dare to let his guard down. Every time he saw him move, Yale had to be more vigilant. After being tricked, Yi Zichen spoke again. Look at how scared you are. Creak. He really could not hold it in any longer. The emotional godhood was clearly stabilizing his emotions, but he just couldn't help but feel angry. Yale clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He really wanted to skin Yi Zichen alive, eat his flesh and drink his blood, seal his soul and torture him for all eternity. Hey yo, another sudden punch. Yale clenched his teeth and hurriedly assumed a defensive stance. Unfortunately, Yi Zichen was still just a feint. Then he slapped his thigh and laughed. You're going to make me laugh to death. Is there a need to be afraid of that? You want to be the divine emperor? You have the heart of an ant. Even the slightest movement of a blade of grass can scare you to death. I'm going to die of anger. You'll felt wrong too. Although Chinese Kung Fu was ordinary, it was completely different from what he'd encountered before. Yale could remain calm even if MT Tai collapsed in front of him. But he had to be on guard against Yi Zichen's feint. Let's put it this way. When he fought with others, he could determine whether or not Yi Zichen was about to attack based on the energy he controlled and the surrounding energy fluctuations. Chinese Kung Fu, there was no need. It was just a pure physical clash. Yale couldn't tell which was real and which was fake, but he couldn't just stand there and let Yi Zichen punch him for no reason. Don't say, even without energy, it would still hurt. It could also hurt his internal organs. Moreover, Chinese Kung Fu could also be used halfway through the fusion of divine power. With that kind of Kung Fu, How could he not be on guard? I'm going to die of laughter. I regret not bringing my phone or something. If I had brought my phone to record this, I could have shown it to them when I got back. The divine emperor of a generation scared me silly. I can watch it when I'm old and have some fun. Oomph. Yale still didn't say anything. He put his hands in his pockets and slowly controlled his divine power. He wasn't trying to give Yi Zichen a surprise attack. He knew how to control his energy. There was no way it could escape Yi Zichen's senses. Don't be fooled by his silly grin. His spiritual sense had always been in the most tense state, inspecting Yale's every move. Yale was controlling his energy. It was a godhead. What appeared in his hand was a godhead. This godhead was a substitute for Qinglan's darkness godhead. It wasn't a special godhead. Throughout the history of the god race, there were only a few special godheads. It was extremely difficult to obtain one. As a result, Yale's godhead was the most ordinary of golden godheads. He'd snatched it from a lord god. Speaking of substitutes, Yale had considered that he might not be able to obtain Qinglan's darkness godhead, which was why he'd kept it with him. However, Qinglan had been captured. Thus, this substitute would no longer have any value. He hadn't expected, in the end, he'd still have to use it. In fact, in Yale's heart, he didn't want to use this godhood. It wasn't that he was ordinary, it was that he wasn't suitable. He'd already fused with 4 godheads. One was his own. The other 3 came from the Second Era's primal demon emperor, the emotional god king, and the former god emperor. Of the 3, even the weakest of the Second Era's primal demon emperor was a half-step god king. One could imagine how powerful the 3 were. Fusing with them was practically the limit of what Yale could contain. But he knew very well, 5, only then could he truly be invincible. He'd made countless calculations and experimented with multiple subjects. The conclusion he'd reached was that he could contain, at most, 1 godhead. And then there was the darkness godhead that had once belonged to him. Because he'd condensed the darkness godhead, it had an affinity with him. If he absorbed it, it wouldn't resist too violently. The darkness godhead was also a special godhead. If he could fuse with it, that would be Yale's peak. Unfortunately, that detestable 5 elements great emperor, that detestable emperor Star-Lord, his peak would no longer exist. He only had this godhood in his hand, and it was fortunate that he had this godhood. Although, if he fused with it, he couldn't reach his peak. If he fused with it, his heart would find it hard to accept. If he fused with it, he had no other choice. But at least, if he fused with it, that was enough to solve the current problem. His peak was no longer important. What was important was that he didn't want this jumping monkey to shut up. Moreover, Chapter 2028. He really didn't want this to happen. No matter what, this was Yale's worst move. The godhead of an ordinary overgod. The darkness godhead. There was simply no comparison between the two. It was just that, given the current situation, if he didn't do this, who knew where the darkness godhead would go? The Emperor's star. Yale lowered his gaze, his eyes filled with hatred. It was him. It was this era's Star-Lord who'd shattered his dreams of becoming a hegemon. He truly regretted it. When the starlight backfired, he should have just dealt with him. If he died then, era's Star-Lord wouldn't have had the courage to cause trouble for the outsiders. The darkness godhead would still belong to him. His peak, it would still belong to him. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? Yi Zichen, who'd been toying with Yale this entire time, furrowed his brows in displeasure. Are you asking for a beating? Whoosh. This time, Yi Zichen didn't faint. He attacked Yale for real and punched him squarely in the nose. This punch directly smashed Yale's nose. The sound of his nose breaking rang out clearly, and blue blood flowed from his nostrils. Even though this punch contained no energy, it was still powerful. The immense force forced Yale back several dozen meters, and the rocks beneath his feet caused him to accidentally fall to the ground. The godhead in his hand. It fell off. Yi Zichen noticed the godhead. Even though Yale was struggling internally, he knew that this was his final trump card. Even if he didn't want to, he had to fuse with it. Just now, he'd already begun awakening it, so the dim godhead began to glow slightly. Of course, the light was very faint. However, that didn't affect how dazzling the light of the godhead was in the dark. What is this? A godhead? Yizichin knelt on the ground and prepared to pick it up. Scram. In the blink of an eye, Yale, whose nose had been shattered, charged at Yizichin like a wild beast. The enormous impact sent Yizichin flying. He crashed into a distant ruin and was buried under a pile of rubble. Crash! Yizichin pushed aside the rubble. He was covered in dust. He patted it twice, gray dust swirled around them. Yizichin covered his mouth and coughed uncontrollably. Yale, that's a little shameless. The darkness divine spark isn't here, but you still have a backup. Isn't that a little too much? Yizichin couldn't help but shrug as he dusted himself off. Looking at his expression, it seemed that he was afraid that Yale would fuse with the godhood, so he kept comforting him with his hands. Brother, you have to consider it carefully. If you fuse with it, you won't be able to fuse with the darkness divine deity. You should be very clear about the difference between this kind of trash-like divine deity and the darkness divine deity. Are you willing to live like this? Yale narrowed his eyes slightly. He opened his palm, and the ordinary godhead became even more dazzling. Yale, how about this? Don't fuse with it. If you win, I'll give you the position of the darkness godhead. How about it? Ha! At this moment, Yale snorted softly. With his head facing the sky, he slowly put the godhead into his mouth. You really don't understand human language. Boom! The Emperor Star suddenly launched an attack. Yale seemed to have long since prepared for this. He thrust his left hand forward. Surging divine power and the Emperor Star's radiance surged. They transformed into two long rivers of gold and blue in this world. Boom! He put the godhead in. The Emperor Star's attacks grew fiercer and fiercer. It was as if he had to snatch the godhead back before Yale fused with it. However, Yale's fusion seemed to be going faster than he'd imagined. Buzz! A wave of divine power spread out with Yale as the center. Yale didn't even need to use his divine power to resist Yizichin's advance. His divine power alone prevented the Emperor Star from taking even half a step forward. He knew he couldn't force his way through. The Emperor Star took a few steps back, then landed 10,000 meters away. It stared at Yale, whose eyes glowed with golden light. In the center of the vortex of divine power, Yale spread his arms wide, and there was an obscure brilliance flickering in his chest where his heart was. Cracks spread across his body. He healed. He reappeared. He healed. He howled in pain, his mouth releasing bestial roars. He was in pain. You should know, before this, he'd already fused with 4 godheads. His body was already on the verge of saturation. Although the 5th godhead was only at the level of an ordinary overgod, its power couldn't be underestimated. More importantly, this godhead wasn't very compatible with him. It affected him even more. Boom! At that moment, a beam of golden light shot out from between Yale's eyebrows, piercing through the primal chaos in the sky above the god realm. The dazzling golden light filled the surrounding area with golden clouds. The entire god realm, or rather, the entire Milky Way galaxy, saw this dazzling light. Before long, suddenly, a golden divine spark appeared above the orbit of the 4 divine sparks above Yale's head. The 5th godhead. He'd succeeded. His body did not explode because of the 5th godhead. Instead, he relied on his astonishing willpower to completely fuse with this godhead. The cracks on his skin disappeared. The baptism of that godhead, from his head to his feet, his entire body was covered in a layer of golden divine light. At that moment, he seemed to be made of gold, dazzling to the eye. Huh! Yale roared for a full 15 minutes, then stopped. He wanted to laugh, but his parched throat made him cough uncontrollably. Ha ha! Ha ha ha! However, this cough didn't dampen his excitement. He looked up at the 5 godheads above his head and laughed heartily. When the 5th godhead appeared, the other godheads experienced a qualitative leap. Ha ha! Yale laughed wantonly. He'd succeeded, even though he'd felt like he'd almost died from the shock waves of energy. But he'd persevered. 5 godheads. No one in the world was his match. Clap, clap, clap. Not long after, Yale suddenly heard someone clapping beside his ear. He looked up and saw that the person applauding was none other than the Emperor's star, Yi Zichen. Not bad. 5 godheads. What a sight. Emperor's star. Hey, don't be like that. I came to congratulate you. Why do you look like you're going to devour me? Yi Zichen shrugged, then his lips curved into a smile. He was smiling. That's right. After Yale fused with his 5th godhead, everyone should have despaired, but Yi Zichen was smiling. Next, Yi Zichen gently shrugged. Chapter 2029. Thousands of miles away. The gods of the god race might not know that their god emperor was still alive. He might also know. He just didn't want to continue struggling. They were really tired, whether it was the pressure Yale brought them or the self-abandonment in their hearts. The Outer Realm god race. The entire clan surrendered. The few who resisted were also killed. The era's experts either took captives or treated their wounds on the spot. The 4 auxiliary stars were still discussing the outcome of the battle between Yale and the Emperor's star. Even the coldest of them all, Su Luer, believed the Emperor's star to be the final victor. No matter what, they had absolute trust and confidence in the Emperor's star. Suddenly, Yinshang felt his shoulder being patted. Then, a mischievous voice appeared in the ears of the 4 auxiliary stars. Emperor Ming immediately frowned. No matter who it was, the current situation was not the time to joke around. Just as she was about to reprimand him, Mei-er, Empress Su Luer knit her brows, looked at the beautiful girl in front of her, and said her name. Su Mei-er of the 9-tailed fox clan. She was also the girl who'd first used the name Chi Mei to instigate and threaten Yi Zichen into the painting world. Big Sis Luer, Su Mei-er, smiled sweetly, even though everyone was afraid of Su Luer's ice breath. However, Gun Yinshin acted as if she couldn't feel it and moved closer to her ear. His lips trembled as if he were trying to say something to her. Given Emperor Hades and the others' cultivation, they could hear even the slightest sound. Unfortunately, they couldn't hear a single word of the secret conversation between the 2 sisters. Really, after a while, Su Mei-er left Su Luer's ear. Everyone saw Su Luer narrow her eyes. From her expression, they could tell that she didn't quite believe it. Although the others were curious, they didn't ask before Su Luer said anything. No questions asked. Part of the reason was that he didn't dare to ask. Of course it's true. Don't tell me you don't believe me. Su Mei-er said, feeling wronged. Of course I believe you. With that, Su Luer looked at the other 3 auxiliary stars. Let's go. The other 3 auxiliary stars were puzzled. What was going on? Did he just leave without saying anything? Before they could speak, Su Luer had already left with Su Mei-er. As for the auxiliary stars who had stayed behind, let's go. Helplessness could be seen in their eyes as they shrugged. Big Sister Su Luer has always been like this. Few words. Decisive. If you don't listen, I'll beat you up. Among them, Go Yuzhan was the one who was beaten up the most, and he was the first to follow. He didn't want to get beaten up by Su Luer. Martial Song Star. Mei martial arts. That wasn't something an ordinary person could defeat. Based on her aura, they were able to pinpoint her location. Before long, the auxiliary stars noticed that Su Mei-er and Su Luer had already left the god realm. They had arrived in the outer realm. During this time, they also saw many experts of the god, Yao, and demon races rushing out as well. It looked like they were taking the same path as them. His heart was filled with suspicion. Only after traveling several million kilometers did Emperor Hades and the others sense Su Luer's location. When they arrived, they saw tens of thousands of people. These people came from different races, including the god, Yao, and demon races. They were all at different realms, ranging from imperial lords to sky. Immortals, he was right. Just a moment ago, Emperor Hades had sensed the aura of an immortal. Following the aura, the immortal also seemed to be in a panic. That made sense. Even the weakest person by his side was a supreme. A mere sky immortal like him was bound to be terrified. Big Sister Luer, what on earth is going on? Go Yuzhan ran over and asked. They'd come here for no reason at all, and now there were so many other people. This was even more incomprehensible. Hey, don't talk nonsense. Su Mei-er ran over, grabbed Emperor Hades, Go Yuzhan, and Yin Shang and placed them in different positions. These are your positions. Don't wander off. They still stood there in confusion. Go Yuzhan's eyes widened, and just as he was about to say something, Shill, Sumer put a finger to her lips, indicating that Go Yuzhan shouldn't say anything. What on earth is going on? Why aren't we allowed to talk? For some reason, Go Yuzhan stopped yelling. Instead, he communicated with Yin Shang and the others via divine sense. Big Sister Luo, you should know, right? I'm not too sure either. Mayor just told me that the Emperor's Star needs it, said Su Luo. The Emperor's Star? Stop messing around. The Emperor's Star is in the divine imperial palace. Go Yuzhan felt like he'd been tricked. He tried to turn and leave, only to find that his entire body was chained to the spot. He couldn't even move. Don't struggle. I tried just now, but I can't move, said Emperor Hades. What on earth is this little girl? Show. Suddenly, Yin Shang shut his eyes and put his hand to his mouth, signaling Go Yuzhan to shut up. Damn, have you been infected? Don't talk. I think I understand. Yin Shang frowned at Go Yuzhan, then pointed at their positions, then at the sky. Don't you think we're standing where the 4 auxiliary stars of the Milky Way should be? Go Yuzhan's eyes widened. Emperor Hades frowned and looked at the sky, then back at their positions. For a long time, he said nothing. I was just wondering why only the Master of the Stars had come, said Yin Shang. From the looks of it, the Emperor's Star really does need it. What are you talking about? I don't understand, shouted Go Yuzhan. That girl brought us here to gather all the stars. If nothing unexpected happens, the Emperor's Star needs to borrow our starlight. The Emperor's Star needed starlight? The hair on Go Yuzhan's head swayed a few times. Before long, he saw other Master of the Stars appear behind him. Sumer led them to their respective positions. But I'm a little curious. Why are all of us here? The Emperor's Star is in the Outlands. Even if he borrows starlight, who's going to be the hub? Before Yin Shang could finish his sentence, he saw Sumer was standing in the center. You know quite a lot. No wonder you're the Minister of the Left. You're smarter than those Minister of the Right who only knows how to fight. She smiled at Yin Shang, then heard Sumer speak again. Of course I'm going to be the hub. You? Yin Shang's eyes widened. You're the Master of the Stars. Which star? Do you know what kind of burden your body has to bear when we add starlight to you? Me? I'm a fated star. Nonsense. Yin Shang roared. A fated star was a very high-level star because of its connection to the Emperor's Star. But in reality, fated stars couldn't even compare to ordinary stars. You'll die. Chapter 2030. Above the divine imperial palace, the winds and clouds howled and thunder rumbled. Gods, the highest plane in the entire Milky Way galaxy. They were the most favored race in the Milky Way. The billions of other races might not even have a single god. Gods. All of them were gods. This was the heavens' blessing for them. Unfortunately, blessing didn't mean indulgence. Fusing with 5 godheads might be heaven-defying, but the moment Yale fused with the 5th godhead, heaven and earth began to reject his existence. The power of heaven and earth suppressed him. Rumbling thunder. It was like a tribulation descending upon his head. The vigorous, purplish-red heavenly lightning was as thick as a python, as if it had a mind of its own. When the lightning entered Yale's body from the top of his head, his entire body was enveloped in the power of lightning. Emperor Star, who had comprehended the 5 elements of heaven, was extremely sensitive to lightning. This sort of lightning punishment, he could say without hesitation that even a god king wouldn't be able to withstand 3 bolts. The power of this lightning punishment could destroy the heavens and the earth. Fortunately, it had landed on Yale. Otherwise, half of the divine race would have been destroyed by this lightning punishment. However, after the 99th bolt of heavenly lightning, Yale was still unscathed. Emperor Star furrowed his brows. He had to say, after fusing with the 5th godhead, even if it was just an ordinary godhead, Yale's increase in strength was shocking. If he fused with a darkness godhead, perhaps it was true. No one in the entire Milky Way could stop him. It seems that's the only way. Yi Zichen clenched his fists as he looked at Yale. Provoking Yale into fusing with the 5th godhead had been their plan all along. They didn't know that Yale had a chief godhead. However, a crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. It was even more impossible for someone like Yale to hang on to the green wave darkness godhead. Therefore, Yi Zichen and the others firmly believed. Yale had a substitute. Getting him to fuse with it was the first step. Only a darkness godhead could help him reach the peak. Although the other godheads would make him strong, they weren't invincible. Ji Yuan had a detailed plan. Unfortunately, right now, there was only one possibility that could be carried out. The heavenly lightning punishment was over. Yale, bathed in the lightning punishment, laughed maniacally. Lightning punishment. It existed for the sake of the end. Unfortunately, the world might have underestimated his power. The lightning punishment was like a tickle to him, and it also helped him refine his strength. He really had to be grateful for this lightning punishment. If not for it, it would have taken him a lot of effort to refine and purify his power. Even though he had fused with an ordinary divine spark, the result was not perfect. But he was infatuated with this kind of power. It was still enough to satisfy him. His every movement, Yale felt that the world was under his control. As long as he willed it, he could crush the entire divine race with a gentle clench of his fist. At this moment, he was the creator of heaven and earth. He was the supreme god who could decide the life and death of a plane. Of course, before that, he needed to deal with a little ant. It was the one in front of him. If he hadn't been hallucinating, this little ant seemed to have said to him, "The dream was shattered." Emperor Star, do you have anything to say now? Swoosh. Just as Yi Zichen was about to speak, his gaze darkened. However, before he could react, he felt a heavy punch to his chest. This punch, furthermore, the power of the previous lightning tribulation was completely infused into Yi Zichen's body. Not only that, there was also a numbing electric current in it. Here's a gift for you. There's also the power of a cute electric fairy inside. What do you think? Familiar, right? The power of lightning was a small matter. In terms of physique, Yi Zichen had fused with the 5 elemental fairies and was showered with lightning every day. His resistance to lightning wasn't much weaker than Yale's. It was just that the paralyzing effect of the lightning element was rather troublesome. The electricity coursing through his body made him feel a bit numb. He propped himself up against a nearby dilapidated building and struggled to his feet. The power of 5 godheads is only SOS, said Yale with a chuckle. Emperor Star, you said that once I fuse with this godhead, my dream will be shattered. This kind of power naturally won't be of much use to you, but I want to see how you'll face me, Emperor Star. I've never seen such power before. Boom! The rubble beneath his feet flew into the air. It was as if gravity had disappeared. Everything in the world rose above Yale's head. With a wave of his hand, they all charged towards Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen drew a circle. The rubble fell into the circle, then emerged from the blue circle and shot towards Yale. Yi Zichen clenched his fists. Everything turned to dust. Emperor Star, if this is all you're capable of, then I don't have time to play with you. Yale brushed the dust off his body, and the 5 godheads spun above his head. They glowed with blinding light, and his tone was wild and unyielding. Be serious, everyone. My time is precious. I trust you feel the same way, Emperor Star. Yi Zichen laughed. Yi Zichen cracked his neck and flipped his wrist. I'm just afraid I won't be able to endure it. With that, a long sword suddenly appeared behind Yi Zichen. The blade was sharp. It pointed into the sky. Big Sister Xiang, there's no need to say so much between us. I'll help you, said Xianyuan Xiang with a warm smile. Sorry to trouble you. Instantly, the sun and moon alternated. The sky above the god realm suddenly transformed into a vast river of stars. Countless stars twinkled with starlight. Yale's eyes narrowed. When the river of stars gathered, he, who'd fused with 5 godheads, felt his heart tremble. The experts on the outskirts of the god realm looked up at the sky. The river of stars enveloped heaven and earth, and they were all within it. Even though the river of stars didn't come for them, the pressure it released wasn't something they could resist. The river of stars is so dazzling. Look at those stars. They should be Yin Shang's, right? Hey, where did Emperor Hades and the others go? The First Era experts whispered to each other. They'd been busy organizing the God Race captives, so none of them noticed where Yin Shang and the others had gone. At that moment, outside the God Realm, it's begun. Sumer stood at the center of the Emperor's stars, her eyes flashing with sharpness. The surrounding stars sensed their stars calling out to them. The Emperor's stars. They needed their starlight. Miss, you're really going to die. Hurry up and come out. Yin Shang still hadn't contacted the Minister of the Left. They were the four great auxiliary stars. The power of the stars had to converge on them before they could transmit it to Su Mei so long as even one of them didn't transmit it. The other three stars couldn't transmit their power either. At that moment, Yin Shang was bearing an enormous burden of starlight. He didn't want Su Mei to die. The fated star, that meant she was inextricably linked to the Emperor's star. If she died, the Emperor's star, will I die, or will the Emperor's star die? You, as a minister of the left, don't you have a sense of balance? Chapter 2031. Perhaps it wasn't fair to Su Mei when she told him who would live and who would die. Yin Shang didn't hesitate in the slightest. To him, there was no doubt about it. The Emperor's star was more important than anything else. The suppressed starlight of the group of stars was released, accompanied by a loud rumble. Four azure starlights of the four auxiliary stars poured into Su Mei's body like a gorgeous long river. Even though she'd been mentally prepared, the boundless starlight of the Emperor's star poured into her body, but the tearing pain caused a look of pain to flash across her peerless face. The skin all over his body was densely covered with cracks. From the outside, it looked like her body was about to explode. It was terrifying. It really hurt. Su Mei muttered to herself. She couldn't help but tear up. Su Lu's eyes dimmed. She hadn't interacted much with Su Mei. She knew her by name, Willful Girl, but when she saw her pained expression, she couldn't help but feel a pang in her heart. The four auxiliary stars. Even though the power of the other stars would be transferred into their bodies for conversion, they were only the hubs of the connection. They were transit stations. Su Mei, she was the true carrier of all that pressure. The four auxiliary stars were powerful to begin with. Even so, she could still feel the burden of the boundless starlight on her. Not to mention Su Mei. Go Yuzhan and Emperor Hades didn't say much. They had nothing to do with Su Mei. They were just doing their best to complete their mission. Yin Shang, his brows were deeply furrowed. It wasn't that he cared about Su Mei. He already had someone he liked. He couldn't possibly fall in love with her at first sight. He cared about whether Su Mei could really endure it. He was afraid that something would happen to her midway and cause trouble for the Emperor's star. But now that things had come to this, he could only trust in Su Mei's endurance. Suddenly, Su Mei, who had a pained expression on her face, started to laugh. Her eyes were still tearing up, but she really was laughing. No one knew what she was laughing about, and no one knew why she was able to laugh. Sweetie, you mustn't forget me. Boom! In an instant, Su Mei faced the sky. Pure starlight radiated from her eyes, mouth, and the space between her brows. The dazzling blue beam of light hit the void and turned into a dazzling nebula. It was at this moment, boom, in the void above the divine palace. A river of stars and nebulas converged, and a beam of starlight slammed into Yi Zichen's head. All the blood vessels in his body instantly popped up. The sudden gathering of power caused a savage look to appear in the Emperor's star's eyes. However, as the Emperor's star, the starlight of the other stars all submitted to him. That kind of pain only appeared for a moment. Not long after, he raised his right hand, and the Xinyuan sword fell into his hand. He stood up slowly. With every step he took, a long river of starlight converged behind him and followed him. Boom! Starlight burst forth. The dazzling galaxy above his head was instantly dazzling. The stars in the Milky Way seemed to have a life of their own as they changed mysteriously. The entire world changed. A mysterious aura enveloped heaven and earth. That mysterious aura made it impossible to tell just what was hidden within. Until, how dazzling! Yale instinctively frowned. For a moment, he couldn't open his eyes because of the blinding light. Everything in front of him was completely white. Everything in the world seemed to be enveloped by this pure white. Everything bowed before it. Even the lifeless rocks seemed to come to life. They swayed up and down as if kowtowing. At the same time, the stars in the Milky Way above his head suddenly dispersed. A star, so dazzling that no living being could ignore it, slowly appeared before the millions of stars in the Milky Way. The Emperor Star. Yale's eyes narrowed. He didn't know why, but now that he'd condensed 5 godheads, he felt an emotion called fear. In the instant that the star appeared, the power of the 5 godhoods above his head was suppressed to less than 10% of their power. It's over. The Emperor Star's words were devoid of any emotion. He slowly swung the Xianyuan sword. Yale instinctively channeled all of his strength in order to block the attack. For some reason, he had a feeling that if he didn't give it his all, he might really die to this sword. It's useless. He swung the sword. As the blade swung, a sword radiance that seemed to be able to split the heavens swept up the starlight above the Milky Way. The earth cracked and fell. When the sword radiance landed, heaven and earth were split open. The entire god clan was cut in half when the sword fell. It was also this sword that devoured everything in the world. There was no light. There was no darkness. There was only the vast Milky Way and the dazzling stars. This emperor has fused 5 godheads. No one can be this emperor's match. Yale shouted angrily. The power of the 5 godheads also poured out. Surging divine power flowed out of the godheads, turning into a sea of divine power that wrapped around Yale. The sea of divine power collided with the starlight sword radiance. Heaven and earth no longer had any color. As the 2 powers collided, energy constantly leaked outwards. Just the energy that leaked out was enough to reduce God Kings to smithereens. The Emperor Star raised his sword and shouted. The God Emperor pushed his fist forward. Even though the power of the Godheads was suppressed, the starlight sword radiance couldn't move even half a step forward. Ha ha! This Emperor crack. Just as Yale was laughing wantonly, a clear sound caused his laughter to come to an abrupt end. It was as if a mirror had shattered. Under the impact of the sword radiance, cracks appeared on Yale's God Sea. The surging God Sea seemed to be frozen. It was completely materialized. It's over. It's over. All of a sudden, the Emperor Star wielded the Xianyuan sword and pressed it down. The entire Milky Way was pressed down with the sword. At this moment, Yale bore the power of the entire Milky Way, the power of the vast starry sky, and the power of millions of stars. No, the God Sea shattered. In a flash, the sword radiance swallowed Yale. As Yale screamed, the sword radiance split the entire God clan in 2. The dimensional crack appeared in his sight. More than 10 seconds passed. The starlight wreaked havoc. When the starlight dispersed, the entire God clan fell silent. Yale didn't appear in the Emperor Star's sight again. At this moment, the Emperor Star sheathed his sword. The Xianyuan sword returned to its sheath. It's over. It's over. As soon as he finished speaking, the starlight connected to the Emperor Star was expelled. Finally, puff! At this moment, a pair of demonic hands pierced through the Emperor Star's chest. Chapter 2032. The timing was perfect. The Emperor Star was expelling the starlight from the stars, and was at the lowest point of his life. That sword just now, it even shattered the world. It couldn't help but let down its guard. Until the hand passed through the chest, blood slowly dripped from the hands in front of the chest to the ground, and a demonic whisper lingered in his ears. Thank you, cute Emperor Star. There was no need to look back. From the tone and tone, the Emperor Star was sure that this person was Yale. He wasn't dead. He was still alive and well. He wasn't surprised that Yale was still alive. The only thought in the Emperor Star's mind was, he was careless. His nerves had been stretched taut to this point. But at the last moment, he let down his guard. The power of the sword that had fused with the starlight and shattered the world couldn't be underestimated. The Protoss could be split in 2, not to mention others. But the Emperor Star was facing Yale. The current Yale couldn't be described by human beings. Buzz, the Xianyuan sword broke out of its sheath. The sword spirit Xianyuan Xiang controlled the Xianyuan sword to cut the enemy the moment the Emperor Star was in trouble. The blade cut Yale's arm. At this time, the sharp Xianyuan sword seemed to have cut a meteorite. Ding, 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 giving off a crisp sound. Tiny sparks lingered around Yale's arm. But the Xianyuan sword didn't leave any mark on his arm. If you cut again, your Emperor Star will be gone. Yale snorted disdainfully. Only then did Xianyuan Xiang notice the pain on the Emperor Star's face. She desperately wanted to save him, so much so that she forgot that Yale's hand was connected to the Emperor Star's body. The vibration of the Xianyuan sword's attack would be transmitted to the Emperor Star. The blade stopped in the void. With a wave of his hand, a small black hole appeared around the Xianyuan sword. Under the devouring of the black hole, the Xianyuan sword couldn't move anymore. One of the hands that had passed through the Emperor Star was pulled out by Yale. His arm suddenly elongated, holding the Xianyuan sword. With a light flick, the Xianyuan sword's blade fell apart. "Sister Xiang," the Emperor Star shouted. Even when his chest was pierced, he didn't let out such a cry. At the same time, in his mind, the upgraded Soul Pearl Yuan was the same. Seeing the Xianyuan sword shatter, the pain in his heart was far greater than the Emperor Star's. However, he was the last barrier that protected the Emperor Star's spirit sea. Even if the heavens and earth collapsed and all things turned to ashes, he would not let go. He couldn't leave the Imperial Star either. You won't be able to reach the peak with the help of outsiders. I'm just helping you get rid of the stumbling blocks on your path. Emperor Star, you don't need to thank me too much. Yay! Of course, you don't have to be too sad. Very soon, you will follow him. Puff! The other hand on his chest was also pulled out. The river of stars in the void suddenly dimmed, and the starlight above the Emperor Star's head also shrunk to the size of a finger. Thousands of miles away from the Outerium God race, as the Nexus, Sumer could empathize with the Emperor Star the most. When Yale pierced through the Emperor Star's chest, Sumer also spat out a mouthful of blood. After that, there was a backlash of starlight. The starlight of the constellations didn't change at all. It was completely sent back to the constellations by the Emperor's Star. One Xing vomited blood. The more one stood in the center, the more severe the backlash. Other than Sumer, the 4 auxiliary stars were dispirited and listless. The other auxiliary stars and multitude stars also coughed up blood. The river of stars dimmed. The starlight was broken. As the Nexus, Sumer turned into specks of starlight and merged with the stars, disappearing without a trace. To the Emperor's Star, to the entire vast starry sky, to the millions of stars, this was a crushing defeat. Emperor's Star. The left minister, Yin Shang, who had suffered the backlash, stared at Sumer, who had turned into starlight. His worry for the Emperor Star had reached an extreme level. He knew there must be a huge problem with the Emperor Star. But he, the Prime Minister of the Star Dynasty, wasn't by the Emperor Star's side. Emperor, helpless. Before he could finish his sentence, his vision went black. Looking at the void under his feet. Young people these days are so worrisome. At that moment, an old voice filled with helplessness rang out from the void. A blue energy rope appeared at Yin Shang's waist. At the same time, a middle-aged man with a long sword on his back shuttled between the Star Lords, supporting the unconscious Star Lord in his sword formation. You've moved pretty quickly without a sound. With a flick of the rope, Yin Shang was tossed onto the sword formation. The Star Lords were all protected within it. You're the same. If any of the other major powers of the previous era had appeared here, they would definitely be shocked. But these two, they were the Hermit Emperor and Baihaoyu of the Bai family. Don't think I don't know that you've gone after that girl's divine soul, said Baihaoyu. The Hermit Emperor's face reddened, but then he dimmed at Baihaoyu's words. That girl chased after you for an entire era. Are you sure you don't want her to find out that you're actually? Is that necessary? The Hermit Emperor smiled, looking at the golden specks of light in the jade bottle in his hand. As long as she can live happily. That sounds like something you'd say. You make it sound like you know me very well. The Hermit Emperor narrowed his eyes at Baihaoyu. Don't forget that we're not from the same era. But I'm you, aren't I? The two stared at each other in silence. A long time passed. The hermit emperor carefully placed the jade bottle in his robes and looked up at the nebula that was about to dissipate. I don't have time to talk about this. If you really want to chat with me, we can drink after everything ends. Forget it. We won't be able to see each other then. By how you laughed. The hermit emperor froze, but then he understood what he meant. You're right. Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Judging by how fast the nebula is dispersing, we have to hurry over. If we're late, we won't be able to see the most exciting part. The god race's divine palace. Yo was very excited. He was very grateful for the sword the Emperor's star had given him. If not for that, his sealed godhead wouldn't have been able to completely break the seal. Previously, after fusing with his godhead, he'd only been able to break half of the seal. The seal of a king of the laws really couldn't be underestimated. However, the godhead seal he'd been worrying about all this time had been completely broken by the Emperor's star sword. Now, the seal on his main body's godhead had been broken, even if his fifth godhead had only fused with an ordinary master god's godhead. He really was. For some reason, Yale's expression changed abruptly. He looked at the godhead above his head in astonishment. Chapter 2033. This was definitely bad news for Yale. Each of the 5 divine sparks had their own role. Suddenly losing contact with the divine sparks at this time? No. Before that, he had to deal with the Emperor's star. Right now, Yale's thoughts were the clearest and most effective. He didn't want to waste any more time with the Emperor's star. He knew that the longer he delayed, the more mistakes he would make. From the Emperor's star, although it had hindered him from fusing with the darkness divine spark, the seal on his own divine spark had been broken, which made up for his losses. He had already obtained more than enough. Leaving the Emperor's star alive would only be a disaster. Die! He grabbed the Emperor's star's head with both hands. He channeled all his strength into his arms, wanting to crush the Emperor's star's head with his own hands. Destroy his divine spark. Break his starlight. Make it impossible for him to ever be reborn again. Yale, this Emperor has always taught you not to be too hasty. Why won't you listen? A deep whisper suddenly appeared in Yale's sea of consciousness. The familiar tone caused Yale's expression to change. Then, without any hesitation, he tried to, "This Empress is in your soul. Do you think you can still freely control everything at this time?" Before he finished speaking, Yale suddenly retracted his hands from the Emperor's star's head and tightly gripped his own neck. The Emperor's star fell to the ground from his arms. The starlight of the Emperor's star revolved around it, healing the damaged parts. At the same time, above Yale's head, the divine spark that had belonged to the old God Emperor was flashing with dazzling light. "God Emperor!" Yale roared, the other 4 divine sparks flashing. Of the 2 hands gripping his neck, one broke free from the God Emperor's control. It grabbed the other arm, trying to slow down the feeling of suffocation. "You're already dead. Why are you pretending to be a savior?" The arm suddenly grabbed the arm controlled by the God Emperor's soul and pulled. The arm was pulled away from Yale's shoulder. However, the arm didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it floated in the air as if it had a soul in it. As expected, Yale sneered. "You sure are decisive." The arm floating in the air let out a disdainful chuckle. "If you're dead, you should just die. Why did you come out and die again? Could it be that death can make you feel happy?" Yale stared at his arm, but his divine sense was locked onto the Imperial star on the ground. Stall for one more second, the Emperor star's injuries would recover a little. If this dragged on until the Emperor star made a comeback, Yale, who had lost his God Emperor godhead, would no longer be a match for the Emperor's star. One had to know, among his 5 godheads, the God Emperor's godhead occupied a large proportion. "Who said I'm dead? Did you say that?" At this moment, the arm that originally belonged to Yale actually squirmed out new skin from the torn part. Not long after, in front of Yale, the former divine emperor appeared with a smile. "I've never died before. I've only been staying here to recover from my injuries. You should know that this is the safest place. Of course, I also want to see what the God race will become after you become the God Emperor. If you do well, it's not impossible to give you the position of God Emperor. It's a pity. You've made this emperor very dissatisfied. In an instant, the divine emperor's face darkened. That's right. From a moment he was killed by Yale to the fusion of his godhead, it was all part of the divine emperor's plan. Yale, he had always been under the divine emperor palace's surveillance. He had obtained a method of fusing godheads from the second era's primordial demon emperor and fused the godheads of the demon emperor and the emotional god king. The divine emperor knew Yale's next target would definitely be him, so he might as well do as he wished. He left the godhead with him for a period of time. It would also allow him to get through the period of serious injuries. During this period, he had been carefully hiding his divine soul inside the godhead. In order not to attract Yale's attention, he had even lent the godhead's power to him. The divine emperor, he had also witnessed everything that Yale had done with his own eyes. Under his leadership, the god race had become fragmented. It was very aggressive. The enemies he had made were also very strong. Even if the second era didn't attack the god race, the divine emperor believed that the other planes would definitely gather their forces to attack the god race. Of course, among these planes, the second era's best choice was to attack the god race. Only the second era's Star-Lord. Only then could Yale truly feel the pressure. You schemed against this emperor, Yale roared. This was something that he had never imagined. The divine emperor was not dead. Fusing with his godhead was just one of his plans. He wanted to use himself to get through the most dangerous period. At this time, he appeared in front of him again, and in his peak state. If you think so, this emperor will not deny it. The divine emperor spread his hands and smiled. That smile was particularly dazzling to Yale. Why, Yale was puzzled. All his plans seemed to be part of someone else's plan. Every step he took, he was led by the nose by others. Creak! He suddenly clenched his fists. It didn't matter anymore. Yale suddenly felt relieved. Even if the old divine emperor resurrected now, he had already fused with 4 godheads. Even 10 old divine emperors might not necessarily be able to defeat him. What was he afraid of? The old divine emperor could just kill him here and now. At that time, once the emperor's star was dealt with, no one would be able to hinder his grand ambitions. Yale, let go. In truth, the god race already knew of your method of fusing with godheads. The reason they didn't make it public was because forcibly fusing with a godhead would cause great damage to your soul. You should also be able to feel it. In truth, even just fusing with 4 godheads is a heavy burden on you. Your divine soul is already on the verge of disintegration. You want to spread this method, not help the god race, but lead them towards destruction. Silence. In truth, some of the old god sovereign's words struck directly at Yale's heart. He had also noticed this, but he continued to do so because he firmly believed that he had the ability to solve this side effect. He was still experimenting. He was looking for a way to solve it. Even if he was wrong in the end, before that, anyone who hindered him was his enemy. Shut up. Old fool, die for this emperor. The godhead above his head flashed. Yale's hand reached out towards the old god sovereign's head. That's right. He was still unwilling to give up on the old god sovereign's godhead. Having already lost the darkness godhead, he could not allow this special godhead of the old god sovereign to slip away from his hands. Chapter 2034. The old god emperor was dejected. He sighed and shook his head at Yale, a look of undisguised regret in his eyes. For some reason, this look of regret tugged at Yale's heartstrings. It had to be known that even though he only had 4 divine sparks, it would be difficult for anyone in the heavens to fight him. His absolute strength was enough for him to ignore everything. Why was the old god emperor's every word and action able to stir his emotions to such an extent? There was only one possibility. He feared the old god emperor, no matter how Yale felt. In the eons of the god race's history, the old god emperor had always firmly held the position of god emperor. It was this sort of yearning. Yale had yearned for tens of thousands of years. This sort of fear, built up over time, was not something that could be offset by fusing with several divine sparks and rising in strength. Don't put on that loathsome face. If you've already died once, go die again. His right hand suddenly slammed down. With a wave of his hand, Yale tore through space, revealing a pitch-black dimensional fissure. The world around him twisted, but Yale's hand still reached for the God Emperor's divine sparks. He grabbed them. The sensation on his palm was the warmth of a divine sparks. "You can only belong to me, only me." He tugged, but the divine sparks did not leave with his strength. Instead, he retreated backward, his legs tangling together as he slammed into the ground. Only now did he feel a cold sensation on his wrist. Only then did the pain spread to his nerves. Looking at his wrist, he saw that it had been neatly severed, and his right hand was left at the old God Emperor's feet. How had this been done? Yale stared at the old God Emperor's position, his hands hanging limply at his sides. His eyes were closed, and his expression was one of regret and melancholy. He had never moved before. If Yale remembered correctly, when he had attacked, the old God Emperor had done the same thing. If he hadn't attacked, then the Emperor's star? Suddenly, he looked in the Emperor's star's direction. An old man with grizzled hair had appeared at his side, and from the flickering green light in his hands, he was treating the Emperor's star's wounds. It wasn't this old man either. It was him. At this moment, Yale saw a man wielding a sword appear next to the Emperor's star. On his sword, one could faintly see the green blood. At this moment, he was talking to the old man about Di Xing's injuries. However, but Yale couldn't hear a single word. He tried his best to understand the content of the conversation, but he couldn't hear anything at all. Not only that, what do you want to know? Just ask me directly. I'll tell you everything I know. There's no need to probe so desperately. Don't you think so? A whisper suddenly appeared in his mind. He looked forward and saw the man with the long sword on his back, waving his hand at him. He couldn't understand it, even if he wanted to. His own deity ocean was forcefully broken through by the other party. This guy, Yale roared in his heart. Not only did this guy break his arm, but now Hai was telling him all this as if nothing had happened. To show off? His strength. A bunch of despicable ants. As the Godhead's power surged, Yale's severed arm and right arm wriggled. Not long after, two brand new arms appeared. Clenching his hands into fists, he felt the compatibility between them, then strode toward the old God Emperor. Stop! A ray of sword light suddenly flashed in front of Yale's eyes, cutting open a hole in the ground beneath his feet. Silver sword light gushed out of the hole. Yale narrowed his eyes and clenched his fists, healing the cut in the ground. Then, without stopping, he continued forward. "Old man, what do you think?" Seeing Yale slowly approach, the sword-wielding man no longer tried to hinder him. He walked up to the old God Emperor and whispered. The old God Emperor still had his eyes closed. The sword-wielding man shrugged. "I'll take it as your tacit agreement." With that, the sword-wielding man no longer paid any attention to the old God Emperor and stood in front of Yale. Obstructing ant die. Yale didn't waste words and clenched his fists. As he clenched his fists, the world around him violently exploded, swallowing up the sword-wielding man. After doing all this, Yale didn't even bother to glance at him. His only target was the old God Emperor, the Godhead above his head. Are you taking pity on this Emperor with your silence? Old God Emperor, I didn't expect you to be so soft-hearted. This Emperor stole your position and occupied your Godhead. What are you doing now? Silence? This Emperor killed your trusted aide, the Angel King. Don't tell me you won't avenge him? What do you think you're doing now? Yale pressed closer and closer to the old God Emperor. The old God Emperor still had his eyes closed, but now his hands were placed on his chest, as if he was praying, mourning for yourself? He's mourning for you. With a loud rumble, the sword-wielding man swallowed up by the spatial explosion walked out. Looking at his situation, his clothes were neat and tidy, and his hairpin was also well-behaved. It was clear that Yale's attack hadn't done him any harm. Seeing the man walk out, Yale wasn't surprised at all. He also didn't think that a casual strike, just now, could do anything to this man. As the man spoke, Yale turned his head with disdain. Mourning for this emperor? She looked at the man with a mocking gaze, as if she was looking at a clown who was trying to make people laugh. He mourns for this emperor? Does he think he can? It's not him. He's mourning for you. How could he possibly attack you? Ha ha. Then could it be you? Yale looked the man up and down. I'm certain of your strength, but if you really want to fight me, What qualifications do you have? Do I need qualifications? What qualifications do you think? The Emperor's star, the master of a plane, or an outsider of the universe? Yale shrugged. Sorry, this might hurt your self-esteem, but if it weren't for those people, I wouldn't even have the qualifications to fight you. I advise you not to ask for a snub. Don't really anger me. Oh, what a coincidence. The sword-wielding man suddenly shrugged, then pointed up at the sky. Look, up in the sky, the river of stars formed by the Emperor's star reformed. However, unlike before, there is only one star in this river of stars. The Emperor's star. Yale recognized the identity of this star at a glance and laughed wantonly. You still want to count on him? He instinctively assumed the Emperor's star was Yi Zichen, and this era's Emperor's star was indeed him. Don't be in such a hurry. Take your time. The sword-wielding man shrugged. Yale looked at the river of stars in disdain. He wanted to see what tricks the man had up his sleeve. However, before long. Chapter 2035. Impossible. Yale's pupils constricted violently. His expression was one of utter disbelief. He shook his head vigorously. Countless energy cannons appeared in front of him and bombarded the starry sky above him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He wanted to believe that it was all a smokescreen. It's fake. It's all fake. Yale roared hysterically. The energy cannons bombarded the starry sky without any regard for their energy consumption. However, he didn't know if it was because the cannons weren't close enough, but the cannons didn't shatter what he thought was an illusion. An illusion. It was definitely an illusion. Yale couldn't help but console himself. He could only believe it was an illusion. If it was true, he didn't believe it. If you think it's an illusion, then so be it. Ding! Suddenly, there was a crisp sound. A blue formation of light appeared beneath the sword-wielding man's feet. Azure light shot up into the sky. It connected directly with the starry sky above him. Before long, the starry sky seemed to respond. Light sprinkled down on his head. Specks of starlight covered his body, draping him in a blue imperial robe. It seems this is quite a shock to him. At first, I thought his mental fortitude was strong. At that moment, the Hermit Emperor walked over, but he didn't go to the sword-wielding man's side. Instead, he walked behind Yale. Before long, there was another crisp ding. Everything was almost identical to the sword-wielding man's. Starlight sprinkled down. A blue imperial robe covered his body. You. Yale was speechless. What could make Yale so astonished? He saw 3 Emperor stars in the starry sky above him. There was only one Emperor star. This had never changed since time immemorial. 3. How was this possible? He truly didn't dare believe it. But the truth was right in front of him. Just now, 2 people had already connected with the Emperor stars. As for the last one, Yale didn't even need to think about it. Ding! Starlight shot into the sky. The Emperor's star, Yi Zichen, appeared in front of him. Starlight flashed, and he wore imperial robes. Above the starry sky, the 3 Emperor stars were closely connected. Beneath the starry sky, the 3 Emperor stars formed a triangle around Yale. You too are the Emperor stars of the first and second era. Yale roared. There was only one Emperor star. Even if heaven chose 2 emperors, in the end, only one Emperor star could truly inherit the Emperor star's starlight and the Emperor's robe. 3 imperial robes. The only possibility was that the other 2 were the Emperor stars of the previous 2 eras. The destruction of the first and second eras, but no one had ever seen the Emperor Star Lord's corpse or shattered soul. Unexpectedly, they were all attached to the third era. Aside from Yi Zichen, who was originally the third era's Emperor Star, the bodies of the other 2 were most likely the hosts they'd found. Did you just react? Asked the Hermit Emperor indifferently. This is impossible. For 3 Emperor stars to simultaneously appear in the same epoch, this is simply looking down on the laws. The laws of heaven and earth would never allow you to. All of a sudden, Yale's words stopped abruptly. Why don't you continue? The sword-wielding man shrugged. Looks like you've remembered. You were the one who destroyed the laws of heaven and earth. You were the one who chose to destroy the moment you ascended to the throne. That's right. Yale's silence was proof that he'd just remembered his decision. As a god emperor, He didn't want to be bound by the laws. He knew full well that fusing multiple godheads wouldn't earn the recognition of the laws. If they found out, countless troubles would come looking for him. As a result, he decided to strike first and destroy the laws before they even noticed. He never would have guessed. Wasn't he shooting himself in the foot? So what? Contempt flashed through Yale's eyes. Even if you, two slaves of a defeated nation, appeared here, how much starlight do you have? Even if the laws of heaven and earth are gone, the laws of heaven and earth will still reject you. The origin cosmos can't possibly tolerate you just because you're the emperor stars of another era. You, how long can you stay here? 10 minutes? An hour? So long as I can endure. What can you do to me? You seem to understand? The hermit emperor laughed. I'm just afraid you won't be able to endure. With that, the hermit emperor looked at Yi Zichen. Have you digested most of the memories I just gave you? No problem at all. Yi Zichen made an okay gesture. That's good. The hermit emperor smiled, then turned to the old god emperor, who was still grieving for Yale. Is there anything else you want to say? Silence. The old god emperor kept his hands to his chest, completely ignoring the hermit emperor's words. The hermit emperor seemed like he wanted to speak again, but the sword-wielding man shook his head. In response, the hermit emperor could only shrug helplessly. His gaze instantly sharpened. Whoosh! A ball of blue flames suddenly burst forth from his body. Something's wrong. Yale knit his brows and tried to leave the triangle. Yi Zichen and the sword-wielding man did the same. As the three balls of blue flames burned, the three pillars of light connected, forming an unsealed triangular space. Yale tried to charge out, but the barrier knocked him back. He could only stand inside the seal, his hair standing on end. Danger. It was very dangerous. Every cell in his body was venting the danger he was in right now. During this time, Yale's four godheads glowed even brighter. He looked up at the Milky Way. The three emperor stars slowly moved, their starlight gathering at their center. Boom! At that moment, the starlight fell to the ground. The berserk emperor star's starlight filled the entire triangular sealed space, and it was like a torrential downpour. The massive impact slammed Yale's entire body into the ground, forcing him to lie flat on the ground. It was difficult for him to even move a finger. It was even more difficult. Not only that, the starlight seeped into his body through his pores, slowly corroding it, and constantly stripping away Yale's control over his own body. It was also at this moment, Yale's mind went blank, but he suddenly recalled the time he destroyed the Second Era. He'd seen a remnant scroll in the Emperor Star Palace. The scroll had already been destroyed. All he could see were 3 stars and a single word on the cover. The contents of the remnant scroll were also incomplete, but it could be roughly determined that it recorded a kind of sealing technique. At the time, Yale hadn't paid it much attention. With a wave of his hand, he destroyed the Star Palace, and the scroll had turned to dust along with it. But now, he suddenly understood the incomplete contents of the remnant scroll. Chapter 2036. Within the void, a team of 10 or so people were traversing the primordial chaos. At a glance, it seemed to be a team of the old and weak. There were old men who looked like they were about to die, and youths who looked like they hadn't even reached adulthood yet. All of them had white bandages tied around their bodies. Their bodies were covered in dry blood. However, their eyes were filled with the joy of surviving a calamity. It seemed like they had just escaped from danger. "Monkey, do you think he owes us a huge favor?" said a man with 3 eyes in the sky. His armor had been shattered, and he was limping as he walked. He was being supported by a youth on a windfire wheel. The youth's situation wasn't much different. His clothes weren't covering his body, and there was a terrifying scar on his neck. It seemed like his head had been chopped off, but he was still alive. The monkey that the 3-eyed man mentioned was a demon with golden fur all over his body. His fiery red eyes were bright and full of vigor, but his eyes were filled with exhaustion. Especially when he looked at the 3-eyed man, his eyes were filled with sadness. "Yes, he really owes us a huge favor, especially you." That's right. The team in front of them was the great sage and the others who had been left behind in the universe secret realm. Their appearance here, meant that they had won, and the outsiders had been wiped out by them. The great sage looked sadly at Yang Jian, not for anything else, but for the third eye between his eyebrows. Ha, not bad. If it wasn't for your two masters coming, I might not even have been able to keep my life. However, I still don't quite believe it. Is the Buddhist domain really that heartless? Xuanzang didn't speak. The canopy marshal snorted coldly, and the curtain-lifting general's face was filled with disdain. I, old son, have never counted on those old fogies. They're quite diligent in slaying demons. When I'm in trouble, they all. When I'm free, I'll definitely go to the Buddhist domain and cause a ruckus. Will you come? Xuanzang muttered. The great sage respected Tang, Xuanzang a lot. Seeing that his master didn't like him saying such things, the great sage didn't continue. He knew that even if Xuanzang and the Buddhist domain fell out, he still had some feelings for the Buddhist domain. Moreover, Sirite, why didn't Patriarch Subhoodie come with us? If he didn't come, all of us would have been left behind. I haven't even had the chance to thank him yet. Master said he needs to go to the Buddhist domain to take care of some matters, said the great sage with a light snort. Given the great sage's personality, how could he tolerate this kind of treatment? Time had definitely not smoothed out his edges. On the contrary, it had made them even sharper. He could give up. This was all because of Patriarch Subhoodie. Yang Jian and the others fell silent. It was obvious why Patriarch Subhoodie was heading to the Buddhist domain at this time. Tang Xuanzang was also very clear about this. However, if he didn't listen, he would just glare at him lightly and pretend that he didn't hear anything. As for the Buddhist domain, he was utterly disappointed. Hey, look at what's in front. The god of thunder pointed forward. Everyone looked forward and saw that the war goddess and Elder Lin had arrived before them. The Lord of the Stars. The ones lying in the sword formation of the void were the lords of the stars of the third era. Yang Jian and the others followed closely behind, and seeing the many star lords unconscious, their hearts instantly sank. They grabbed Bean Shang's clothes and shook him violently. Fatty, wake up! Hurry and wake up! Why are you here? What happened to Yi Zi? The four auxiliary stars were all here. Everyone knew very well that the four great auxiliary stars were always by the Emperor Star's side. If they were all unconscious here, then the Emperor Star, boom! At that moment, an ear-piercing rumble came from afar. The dazzling starlight of the Emperor Star pierced through the clouds. Elder Lin and the war goddess looked at each other and nodded. Without a word, they hurried towards the Outerium gods. You guys stay here and wait for them to wake up. The great sage ordered the people beside him. Then he stepped into the air, his figure streaking through the sky like a sword. Behind him, there was a black figure that was almost as fast as him. In the sky, four streaks of light streaked through the sky, heading towards the Outerium gods. You think you can seal me? Dream on. Yale, who was pressed to the ground by the Emperor Star's starlight, struggled with all his might. The divine spark above his head flickered, and majestic divine power gathered around him to resist the starlight falling from the 9 heavens. Open for me. Yale gritted his teeth so hard that they creaked. His lower jaw was trembling violently as he used all his strength. His teeth that were clenched together showed signs of cracking. Green blood flowed down his mouth and face. At that moment, Yale, who'd been pressed to the ground, suddenly moved. He arched his back. The starlight's weight was resisted by his back. The muscles in his arms and legs turned into strips, and the enormous pressure caused cracks to appear on his bones. The crackling sounds were incessant, but Yale turned a deaf ear to them. Ignoring the pain in his body, he resisted the starlight with all his might and slowly straightened his body. Blood seeped out his pores. By now, Yale had turned green. His legs continued to tremble, but he slowly raised his hand and pointed at the 3 Emperor Stars. You, dream on. Words. He couldn't even finish them, but Yale's will was so terrifying that it made their hearts tremble. Die. In an instant, 3 energy cannons condensed in front of Yale. This was all the divine power he could muster while resisting the might of the starlight. They were ordinary energy cannons, but he believed they could deal a fatal blow to the 3 Emperor Stars. Although Yale was in a miserable state, He knew very well that the situation of the three Emperor stars was not much better than his. Yale was well aware of his own strength. If they wanted to seal him here, the three Emperor stars wouldn't spare any effort. They absolutely didn't have the strength to defend themselves against the cannons. Whoosh! The cannons fired. It wasn't particularly bad, but the starlight of the Emperor stars had a huge impact on the cannons. But slow didn't affect the final result. The Hermit Emperor by Hao Yu and Emperor star Yi Zichen's gazes were solemn, just as Yi Zichen was about to discuss a solution with them. The other two Emperor stars glanced at each other and smiled. Next, Yi Zichen felt the power of the stars surge into his body. The bodies of the other two Emperor Star Lords also became blurry at this moment. Of the three Emperor Stars above their heads, the other two Emperor Stars fused with Yi Zichen's. Junior, don't disappoint us. The two Emperor Stars' voices suddenly rang out in his mind. In the end, the future is in your own hands. Chapter 2037. Above the Milky Way, the three Emperor Stars fused into one, making the already eye-catching Emperor Star even more dazzling. Dazzling starlight sprinkled down like rain. Starlight nurtured the budding of life. When it fell upon the lands of the God Realm, all living things came to life. The forest Yale had destroyed earlier. The flowers and grass he'd trampled. It was as if they'd been reborn. They reappeared in Yale's field of vision, thriving. Even more starlight poured into Yi Zichen's body. It was as if he'd been given a new lease on life. The godhead above his head shone brightly, and his skin was as tender as a newborn's. Furthermore, his aura continued to rise like a rocket. Yale couldn't wait any longer. This kind of rising aura filled him with dread. If Yi Zichen had enough time, forget about fusing with only 4 godheads. Even if he'd fused with 5, he might not be able to defeat him. He might not even be able to defeat him. He had to stop him. Yi Zichen's divine power surged through his body. Boundless divine power gathered around him, turning the surrounding sky purple. Whoosh! There was a flash of afterimages. Yale gathered all of his divine power into his arm and struck Yi Zichen's life gate with all his might. Die! Yale roared, but his roar was filled with anticipation. This one punch, in truth, it would decide the outcome of this battle. If the Emperor Star died to this punch, Yale would become the sole ruler of this world. No one could stop him, even in the 4th era, the 5th era. So long as they didn't fuse their 3 Emperor Stars, so long as they were strangled in the cradle, no one could shake Yale's position. If it didn't die, this was already Yale's full strength. He couldn't possibly use any more power after this. The Emperor Star, his strength continued to climb. If this continued, Yale's only fate would be death. He swung his fist, carrying the weight of everything. Dong! Yale's fist seemed to strike a solid wall. The enormous force of the impact caused his entire arm to explode. He hurriedly retreated. The Emperor Star was unscathed. A barrier of condensed starlight surrounded him. The Emperor Star didn't even try to defend against his attack. Huh! At that moment, the Emperor Star opened its eyes. The dazzling starlight dyed his pupils dark blue, and disdain towards Yale flickered between his brows. He ignored Yale and took out a bottle with a flip of his hand. The inside of the bottle was filled with golden spots of light. You've worked hard, Mayor. Bang! The bottle was gently crushed, and the golden specks of light instantly drifted everywhere in the world. But not long after, the specks of light converged again. A pure and holy body condensed in the void. He waved his hand and draped a blue robe over his body in the air. Then, the Emperor Star raised his hand and clenched it. The light of the flames. You've worked hard, Shao. The motes of light converged into a red gem and entered Yi Zichen's body. Then, the Emperor Star closed his eyes, and his star consciousness enveloped the entire Milky Way. When he opened his eyes again, the radiance of the Emperor Star instantly spread out. After doing all of this, only then did Yi Zichen turn around to look at Yale, who was already a bit crazed. I told you a long time ago that it's over. Why are you still struggling? Why did you let those who shouldn't have died help you to your death? Don't tell me. You're satisfied just like that? Emperor Star, roared Yale. Don't force me. I've never forced you. You're the one who's been forcing us. If it weren't for your invasion, would we have ended up like this? Muttered Yi Zichen. I'm doing this for the sake of the entire world's ascension. But your method won't work at all. Each soul can only fuse with one Godhead. You think you're ascending, but that's just pushing the world towards destruction. Impossible. Yale laughed, then pointed at the 4 Godheads above his head. Look at what's above my head. That's the hard truth. I'm not wrong. Up to you. Suddenly, Yi Zichen's tone darkened as he tried to reason with Yale. Starlight surged in his hands, and before long, a great sword formed in front of him. With me here, your ascension shouldn't be able to be used in actual combat. Emperor Star, if you dare, take a single step forward. Crack! A crisp sound reverberated through the sky, causing Yi Zichen's sword-wielding hand to tremble. He looked up at Yale's head. It was his godhood that had shattered. This crack was the result of Yale trying to self-destruct. Have you seen a God Emperor's self-destruction? A divine king's self-destruction can flatten half of the God realm. Not even 100 divine kings can compare to a God Emperor. This Emperor has 4 Godheads. As long as this Emperor wills it, the entire Milky Way galaxy will be destroyed by this Emperor's self-detonation. Do you believe me? Suddenly, a scene flashed through Yi Zichen's mind. Desolation. The entire world was devoid of color. The plane had collapsed. The era had been destroyed. In all of heaven and earth, only he had. Mo. That was the end of Gu Zichen's plane, and Yale's self-destruction was the result. Begin. Do you dare? Do you think you have the power to protect your clansmen? Do you think you can protect all of these planes? Do you dare? Yale roared. This was the last thing he could rely on to threaten Yi Zichen. After a long while, Yi Zichen remained silent. Did you know? Actually, many years ago, I was a rather useless otaku. After a moment of silence, Yi Zichen smiled wryly and looked at Yale. I don't have any dreams of revenge. I just want to be a normal citizen. Who would have thought someone would tell me I'm the reincarnation of the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan? I believed them. Then I became the Emperor Star, the Emperor of the 9 heavens. I believed them. Someone from another plane came to me and told me that his plane had been destroyed. Only I could change the future of the myriad planes. I believed them. I believed them. But my weakness and my saintly heart prevented me from becoming the savior they saw me as. All this time, I've been protected like a precious treasure. Just now, those 2 Emperor Stars risked their lives to keep me alive, so they fused their Emperor Stars and gave them to me. Say, don't you think I'm very lucky? Yale didn't understand why Yi Zichen was telling him all this. He simply narrowed his eyes and stared at Yi Zichen. I'm very lucky. Before long, Yi Zichen answered his own question. I'm a lucky person. Under their protection, I've never wanted to change. But people, how could they change so easily? The country I lived in had no wars, no strife. I was used to a comfortable life. Deep in my bones, I was comfortable. If I changed, what could I possibly become? Yi Zichen looked up at himself mockingly. He did his best to keep his tears from falling. I thought about repaying them and making myself more resolute. I put on an act, but I was afraid. I was so afraid that I'd suddenly die, that I wouldn't be able to return to the real world to play games and eat barbecue. At the very front, afraid. I've been holding it in. If you're afraid of death, then leave. No one can hurt you now, snorted Yale. I wanted to, really. Just now, when you tried to self-destruct, my hands trembled. It's a pity that my compassionate heart wants me to be the hero. Emperor Star. Instantly, Yale's godhead became dazzling. Chapter 2038. The sky was filled with starlight. It wasn't just the God Realm's territory. Even outside of the God Realm, they could see the starlight. What's going on? Quite a few experts looked up at the sky. They knew the Emperor Star was still clashing with the God Kings of the outside realm. The other Lords of the Stars had all been mobilized. It looked like a final battle was about to break out. All they could do was pray that the Emperor Star would win. However, this starlight, Yeezy, the black and golden beams of light suddenly sped up. Emperor Star, don't say I didn't warn you. Yi Zichen looked at Yale, who was slowly walking towards him. He roared angrily and slowly retreated. The 4 godheads above his head were already covered in cracks. It was as if even a gust of wind could cause these godheads to disintegrate. I know. Yi Zichen was much calmer in the face of Yale's threat. In fact, judging from the performance of the two of them, Yale had already lost. Aren't you going to self-destruct? You know I'm going to destroy the entire world. Without waiting for Yale to finish, Yi Zichen answered. In that case, do you want the entire world to bear the consequences of your hasty decision? No. Yi Zichen smiled and shook his head. I'll bear the consequences myself. With that, Yi Zichen suddenly sped up. Before Yale could react, he'd already appeared in front of him. Self-destruct? You don't have the courage to do that, do you? In that case, I'll give you a push. He clenched his fist. The four godheads, which were already full of cracks, instantly exploded. Boundless energy surged outward like a nuclear bomb. Yale, who'd been forced to self-destruct, stared intently at Yi Zichen. Emperor's Star, it's fine. You won't be alone on your journey. I'll be accompanying you. Energy surged. Yale and Yi Zichen, who were within range of the explosion, were slowly swallowed up by the raging energy. This self-destruction was enough to destroy the entire world. They were trapped in a space less than 10 cubic meters wide. No matter how much energy raged, it couldn't break through. Whoosh! Several shadows landed at the Divine Palace. At the very front, the War Goddess and Elder Lin lowered their heads in silence. The black and gold light landed on the ground. The great sage and Yang Jian hurried to the Divine Palace. When they arrived, they just happened to see the space compressing energy until it formed a black hole. The great sage wordlessly walked in front of Elder Lin. Where is he? We're late. After a long time, Elder Lin said to the great sage. He was too late. What does that mean? Does that mean Yezi is dead? Ha! This old son doesn't believe it. The rims of the great sage's eyes reddened. The Rui Jingu Bang spun in his hand, stirring up gusts of wind. Cracks appeared in the surrounding world. Then, the great sage did something that no one had expected. He wanted to enter the crevice. Monkey! Yang Jian grabbed hold of the great sage, preventing him from entering the fissure. The War Goddess and Elder Lin hurriedly stabilized the crack. He was afraid that the great sage would do something stupid again. Let me go. Yezi can't possibly die. Old son, I'm going to find him. The great sage's thinking was simple. He wanted to find the black hole in the spatial fissure. However, there were so many black holes. How could he possibly find the one he was looking for in the vast Milky Way? Let me go. The great sage struggled desperately, but his mind kept replaying the scene of him and Yi Zichen together. Great sage, hurry up and retract your divine abilities. That wasn't a Yao. It was a demonic disguise technique. Hey, Wah, the newest one. Want a taste? Fairy Xia is my bro's woman, so there's no doubt about it. I've decided on your behalf. No one can steal it from you. Yi, the great sage, sat dejectedly on the ground. He looked up at the sky, his bloodshot eyes brimming with crystalline tears. Yang Jian, who'd gone to great lengths to restrain the great sage, sat dejectedly on the ground. He wanted to come back and extort a fortune from Yi. How come he'd never see him again? Little did he know, in the sky above Yang Jian and the great sage's heads, the five elements great emperor, the eastern monarch Tai, and Song Xiong were accompanied by a group of Yao and god experts who'd been captured by the gods. Without Yale, the three of them could do whatever they wanted in the god realm, and it hadn't taken them much effort to rescue them. When they learned that the Lich King was the five elements great emperor, the great emperors were astonished. After explaining the reason, the great emperors expressed their understanding. Empress Su Qingyan and Su Wan were on the verge of tears. They'd reunited after a long time. They could catch up. Just as they were about to join up with Ji Yuan's army, they sensed something strange going on in the divine imperial palace. They'd seen it all with their own eyes. The Emperor's Star, the five elements great emperor and the other great emperors froze. The empress and the others covered their mouths, their eyes wide. Zichen, the Lord of Seven Stars, Yi Rong, fainted. Su Yan's face paled, and she shook her head repeatedly. She lost her footing and almost fell from the sky. In the end, Suwon caught her. Then she felt Zichen tremble violently and choke with sobs. The Emperor's Star. The Masters of the Stars were dumbfounded. The minister of the left, Yin Shang, knelt in the sky. Emperor Hades clutched his head. Su Lu, and Go Yuzhan looked on in shock. The Emperor's Star. Dead? In the end, he had used his own starlight to seal Yale's self-detonation. Had the two of them perished together? Kiki, come back. The Dragon Clan head grabbed a young woman with all his might. She was none other than Xia Kiki, the Golden Dragon. It was like the fated star was the Emperor's Star. She ran toward the divine palace like a madwoman. No one could stop her. Only the leader of the Dragon Clan followed her. And then, she saw it all with her own eyes. Let me go. I'm going to find Big Brother Zichen. Xia Kiki transformed into a golden dragon. But in the blink of an eye, the Dragon Clan head reverted to his true form and grabbed her with his claws. 100 miles. Within 100 miles of the divine imperial palace, no one except the Lord of the Stars could enter. Yang Jian and the great sage sat on the ground and looked up at the sky. Su Lu, and Go Yuzhan lowered their heads in silence. Emperor Hades clutched his head and let out a low roar. Yin Shang punched the ground, soaking it red. The fated star. Su Yin and Xia Kiki hugged each other. Lu Jing gazed at the divine imperial palace. She didn't know why, but she felt bitter. She still couldn't remember Yi Zichen. It was just that. Her dusty memories seemed to awaken, bit by bit. The first era's experts stood 100 miles away, mourning silently. Clansmen from other planes had arrived as well. When they learned of the first era's Star Lord's death, they lowered their heads as well. This battle, they'd won, but they'd sacrificed too much. No one cheered. A heavy silence enveloped everyone's hearts, but at that moment, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. One crisp sound after another rang out in everyone's ears. This familiar sound, it was the sound of a cell phone notification. That's not right. This was the God Realm's territory. They didn't even have a communication network here. Furthermore, who would be so ungrateful as to send them a message under these circumstances? Practically at the same time, everyone took out their phones. Chapter 2039. Ring, ring, ring. He stretched lazily and raised his hand to press the alarm. He got out of bed and washed up. When they arrived at the restaurant, it was already full of people. Kiki held milk and bread in her hands and stuffed them into her mouth. Suyin ate more like a virtuous lady, but she also seemed to be in a rush. Susu, I'm leaving first. I'm going to be late for roll call. Ah, wait for me. Roll call? Yi Zichen, who had just sat down, was stunned for a long time. What are you waiting for? Don't you need to go to class? Lu Jing, who was sitting on the sofa, was shaking her head and reading some dirty manga on her phone. Class. Yi Zichen instantly understood. Today was the day they resumed school. No wonder Xia Kiki and Su Yin were in such a hurry. They hadn't gone to school for so long. No matter how much they hated going to class before, they were in a hurry now. They didn't want to be late. He glanced at the time on his phone. It was too late. Since that was the case, swoosh. Hey, where's Zichen? Didn't he just sit down? Yi Rong walked out of the kitchen in an apron and looked at the empty dining table in confusion. Just now, he used the profound meaning of time to accelerate the time at his place. After eating breakfast, he teleported away. He should be at school by now. Seeing Yi Rong coming over, Lu Jing quickly put away her phone. Old Man Lin and the God King both told him not to use his spiritual energy so carelessly. He was clearly injured back then, but he's still so mischievous. Yi Rong sighed. Su Yin has a good daughter-in-law. What's there to be afraid of? She's the goddess of life. She'll be able to heal any injuries, Lu Qing said. She is good, but aren't you also my good daughter-in-law? As soon as Yi Rong's voice fell, Lu Jing's face turned red and she muttered, I'm not. On the street, the bustling crowd began their busy day. No one noticed that a black-robed young man had suddenly appeared beside them. However, when the young man appeared and saw his attire, everyone was surprised. I forgot again. This is the modern world. Yi Zichen slapped his head. He had already gotten used to the black robe after staying in the modern realm for so long. Even if he had been back for half a month, he still hadn't changed his habits from that time. He was right. They came back. In the final battle of the Divine Imperial Palace, Yi Zichen had used the Emperor Star's radiance to seal Yale's self-destruction. The violent energy engulfed the two of them. Actually, he should be dead. The fact that he was able to survive was actually thanks to the first and second year of Star Lords. Just as his star was about to fall, it was those two Imperial stars that had split apart to bear the burden of Yale's self-destruction, and he had luckily survived. Of course, he had also suffered serious injuries that he had yet to recover from. At that time, he was the one who created the new group, and the video was also a video of him waving his hand while heavily injured but still alive. The people who once belonged to the modern world had all returned. Emperor Hades and Su Yin finally acknowledged each other as brother and sister, and Su Yin didn't hold a grudge against Emperor Hades for speaking ill of her. Xia Kiki didn't become the leader of the dragon race. In her words, the clan elders were still strong and could rule the dragon clan for millions of years. She wanted to stay by brother Yi Zi's side. No one would know if Lu Qing had recovered her memory if she didn't say anything. However, in the end, she decided to return with Su Yin and the others. She even moved into Yi Zichen's mansion. Reason? No, she just liked it. After that, she read those filthy comics day and night. As for the modern world, when the ice receded, everyone's memories would still be the same as before the ice was sealed. So, when Yi Zichen and the others returned, the place looked just as they'd left it. No, all traces of the demon invasion had been erased. You two went too far, muttered Yi Zichen as he caught up to Xia Kiki and Su Yin. Why didn't you wait for me? Who told you to be lazy? Susu, and I tried to wake you up several times. Is that so? Yi Zichen scratched his head in embarrassment. He didn't know if it was because of his injuries or something else, but he really did like to sleep a lot lately. The others couldn't wake him up no matter how much they tried. Hey, you guys really took your time. At that moment, a pretty girl appeared in front of them. Just how pretty was she? Quite a few people bumped into the railings just for looking at her. She was Su Mei-er. Why are you here too? Yi Zichen didn't understand. Me? Hee, seniors, please take care of me in the future, said Su Mei-er with a mischievous smile. You're going to school here? Xia Kiki was shocked. Can I? Su Mei-er felt wronged. No. Then Xia Kiki looked towards Yi Zichen. It seems like you're going to become the school's public enemy in the future. With that, Xia Kiki blinked and said mischievously, Yi Ji seems to be with the class monitor earlier. Are you guys looking for my lil sis? Outside the school, beside the beautiful woman in leather clothes, was a girl with a timid face. The girl kept her head lowered, but when Yi Zichen looked over, her face turned red. Aren't you going to say hello? The girl smiled. Classmate Yi. Class monitor. Yi Zichen smiled, then looked towards the girl. The demon's holy maiden is going to stay here? Maybe this place looks pretty good. It's not bad to stay here for a few hundred years, said the girl. Oh my monster. Demon's holy maiden, a few hundred years. A passerby heard their words and immediately turned to run. However, before he could take a few steps, a girl appeared in front of him and knocked him out, then dialed 120. Did I go too far? The one who spoke was a girl, along with a big sister and 5 cute little fellows. Lil sis, you did the right thing. No, this kind of person should be burned by me. Let me hack him up. How about electrifying him? Do whatever you want. I can't be bothered. You guys are so fierce. The 5 elemental fairies. They had been revived. The fire elemental fairy risked her life to keep their primordial spirits, while Yi Zichen risked his life to keep the fire elemental fairy's primordial spirit. The elemental fairies all knew that their lives were saved by the fire elemental. At that moment, even the lightning elemental fairy treated the fire elemental fairy as an older brother. As for the girl, Li Jiai, I am interning as a kindergarten teacher now. They're my students. I don't know why, but I ended up here, Li Jiai said with a blush. I'm also a kindergarten teacher, Lu shrugged. Some people might have forgotten about her. She was the queen of ice and snow, and one of Su Lu's faded stars. Chapter 2040. Remember in 1 second. Pen divided by fun. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Who would dare to believe it? Big Sister Lu who could freeze even Maine gods with her breath of ice, had come to the modern world to open a kindergarten. No problem, no problem. Yi Zichen was still terrified of his sister-in-law. How I wish. Those naughty brats could be more careful. Don't anger Big Sister, and she'll freeze them. Their little bodies were bony. If they were frozen, they would die. Little Yin, when you have time, tell your sister about it. In the modern world, there are laws. Anyone who injures or kills, someone has to pay the law. I will, but do you think she will be afraid? That one sentence caused Yi Zichen to choke. Good luck, those little fellows. Boss, we're here. 5 young men walked over with their arms around each other's shoulders. Yin Shang, Go Yuzhan, and Emperor Hades Su Yun. As for the other 2, they were unfamiliar. Xiaobai and Kong Ming? No. Little White and Kong Ming remained in the God, Yao, and Devil realms. Both of their races needed the 2 patriarchs to lead them. Then, these 2... didn't I say that Yi Zi couldn't tell? Your fiery eyes of truth are useless. My heavenly eyes are the best. Look for trouble? I, old son, happen to have nothing to do. Puff, the great sage, and Yang Jian. Why are you 2 here? Aren't you busy with the heavenly palace? The Buddhist domain is being reshuffled. My master wants me, old son, to be a holy Buddha. Chanting scriptures every day annoyed me to death, so I ran off. No one in the heavenly palace dares to control me. Yang Jian shrugged. Then what about the 2 of you? We knocked them out and threw them into the trash can. No one should find out for a while, Yang Jian said. Yi Zichen was speechless. These 2 lords were still so reckless. Did you guys hear? DSG won the championship. As the surrounding students discussed the game, Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel a bit familiar with the team's name. Pu Jingwan's team, said Coco. It's her. Yi Zichen still had some impression of her. Back then, she was a popular streamer who wanted him and Kiki to join her team. I wonder what Pu Jingwan is up to. Her? The great sage and Yang Jian looked at each other and smiled. She's probably on the run because of the boy with the surname Shan. Before he could finish speaking, Jingwan, I love you. I don't like you. I beg you to let me go. A woman screamed, then ran in front of Yi Zichen not long later. Boss! Yi Zichen instantly understood when he saw her pitiful expression. Dong one kick. The young man with the surname Divine was kicked a dozen meters away. The passers-by were all dumbfounded. They all thought that the young man would be kicked to death. Then, the young man stood up, patting his butt. I won't give up. Swoosh, he disappeared. Lulu, Jai, sorry to trouble you. No problem. Shio, an afterimage flashed. Everyone on the street was knocked unconscious. Oh, it's the emergency center. Yes, it's the same place as before. The entire street has fainted. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I'm a foreigner. Please come quickly. Bye-bye. Bang. The call ended. Done. Lulu made a victory sign. Everyone else clapped and cheered. Only Yi Zichen couldn't help but facepalm. These guys, they came to cause trouble, right? I really don't know how much trouble they'll cause by staying here. At that moment, Yi Zichen was thinking, should I report them to the higher-ups? No, it's useless even if I report them. These people can't even be killed by atomic bombs. I have to rely on myself to control them. But these people aren't easy to mess with. They're all big sis. Oh my God, we're going to be late, right? Suddenly, Coco exclaimed. Su Yin and Yi Zichen both looked at their phones. Then their expressions changed. They prepared to run towards the school without even saying goodbye. Student, please wait. Nobody noticed when did 2 black Jetta appear in front of the school gate. The one sitting in the car, Elder Lin. For some reason, Yi Zichen had a bad feeling when he saw him appear. Is something the matter? Not long later, an image appeared in Yi Zichen's mind. When will it be? Just now. Elder Lin said solemnly. We found the location of the Milky Way Master. He's in a bad state. Do you need my help? Elder Lin was a bit embarrassed, but his gaze was firm. I'm sorry, but your vacation is over. Wow, you guys are too much. Yi Zichen's face was filled with annoyance, but not long later, a smile flashed across his face. It's just that I really don't like it when I suddenly get back to peace after adventuring for so long. Yang Jian, the great sage, Yin Shang, were ready. Yang Jian and the great sage had already returned to their original forms, while the other three also flashed with starlight. The surrounding people, Lulu, understood. Bang, bang, bang. Another several tens of people fell. Oh no, emergency center. It's me again. Huh? I was a terrorist and locked onto my location? Come if you dare, to see if you guys die or not. Bang. The phone was smashed. They said I'm a terrorist, Lulu said unhappily. You guys control her. Don't let her be too impulsive. With that, Yi Zichen soared into the sky. The great sage, Yang Jian, and the other three emperor stars followed behind him. Yi Ji, you're leaving again? Xia Kiki and Su Yan's faces were filled with worry. Don't worry, I'll come back alive. 6 beams of light shot into the sky. The girls at the school gate looked up at the sky. You should be fine, right? Of course not. Hey, where did those 5 dolls go? Lulu looked at the empty ground. Emperor Star, you're going overboard by not bringing us along. After the 6 beams of light, 5 different colored lights followed, then merged into Yi Zichen's arm. Ha ha, my bad. I won't blame you this time, but if there's a next time, what can you do to him? The electric sprite suddenly interrupted. Me? The fire sprite thought for a while. Nothing, I'll just stick to him. Everyone roared with laughter. They're leaving again. Within the mansion, Lu Jing looked up at the sky. Yi Rong, who was tidying up the tableware, paused for a moment, then returned to normal. If they're gone, then so be it. We'll just wait for him to come back. He's used to that kind of life. He might not be used to this kind of comfort. The story of the Milky Way galaxy finally came to an end. Yale Seal returned the Milky Way galaxy to normal. The other parallel planes were reborn because of Yi Zichen's success. However, the adventure continued. What would happen to the other races of the universe? How were the injuries of the Milky Way master? The enmity between the Milky Way galaxy and the other galaxies? Would the Milky Way galaxy regain its position as the ruler of the universe? Everything, all of this required the Emperor Star and his brothers to bear witness. To realize it, this wasn't the end. The end was just a new beginning. Chapter 2041. Red Packet Server, Chapter 2036. Milky Way Chapter begin. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 2042. Destruction. Desolation. Countless planet-sized rocks floated chaotically through the cosmos. They'd all come from a shattered planet. Judging from the number and size of the rocks, they definitely didn't come from the same planet. There were even quite a few intact planets among them. Unfortunately, the ring of stars was dark and devoid of the planet's spiritual energy. Yang Jian and the great sage shuttled through the rubble, then ascended to a high vantage point and looked down at the ruins below. How tragic! The cute wind, elemental fairy, covered her mouth. From the shattered planets and the dim ring of stars, it was easy to imagine just what sort of calamity had befallen this place. It looks like a galaxy, but it's all destroyed. The fairy's face was expressionless, and her tender little hands flitted through the air from time to time. I can still sense the existence of the 5 elements, but they're already very thin. Based on this galaxy was destroyed roughly 3 to 4 years ago. Yi Zichen said nothing. He simply shuttled through the rubble and planets. After transcending, he was already extremely fast. Yi Zichen could cross the distance between 2 planets in the blink of an eye. He walked past one planet after another, memorizing their appearances. In his mind's eye, he pieced the fragments together and reconstructed their original appearance. Shock. That was the only word that could describe his current emotions. In his mind's eye, a grand, magnificent picture appeared. The galaxy was vast and boundless. Countless planets were arranged according to a mysterious pattern. This wasn't their original appearance. Even so, the shock it brought didn't lessen. Unfortunately, it was already destroyed. Even though it had once been glorious, it was now a desolate, desolate place. This was it. Yi Zichen seemed to sense a hint of familiarity from this remnant. Elder Lin, this place. Yi Zichen glanced at Elder Lin. Little did he know, hot tears welled up in Elder Lin's murky eyes. He silently gazed ahead at the only intact super-large-scale planet and its dim ring of stars. This is the former location of the Milky Way galaxy. The planet before you is the main planet of the Milky Way galaxy, the Silver Star. Instantly, everyone's expressions turned solemn. Elder Lin let out a long sigh and looked at the planet that was tens of thousands of times the size of Earth from afar. The Silver Star is located in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The broken planets you see are the auxiliary planets that make up the Silver Star. There are a total of 24 auxiliary planets that protect the Silver Planet like guards. Each of these 24 planets forms its own system, and there are hundreds of millions of planets within the system. Apart from them, there are countless guard planets that form another system. In the past, this place had its glory days too. Elder Lin let out a long sigh. It was as if he could see the prosperity of the Milky Way galaxy in his eyes. If that's the case, then the amount of planetary debris here isn't right. Yang Jian pointed at the rubble as if he was counting the number of rubble to assemble it. There are only a few hundred broken planets here. The others have all been destroyed. Elder Lin smiled bitterly. Annihilation? Yang Jian raised an eyebrow. Yes, the entire planet, the entire galaxy was annihilated. People from the planet, all dead. Elder Lin's voice was very soft. The inhabitants of those planets might not even know how they died. Not experiencing any pain might be a type of happiness for them. Thinking back to that day, it was like the end of the world. The Milky Way Master and his 24 generals left the galaxy. Chapter 2043. Earth. The Master of the Galaxy had yet to appear. Yi Zichen and the others had no choice but to bring the girl back. Today, it was the 6th day of the girl's coma. Yi Zichen and company were unable to determine the girl's condition. Even the main god of life, Su Yin, was clueless about her situation. All she could do was use the light of recovery. Try her best to heal the girl's external injuries. Su Yin was an expert when it came to healing. She stayed in the room to treat the girl, while the others came to the living room. Elder Lin, is there any news about the Master of the Galaxy? Yi Zichen asked in the living room. He was not particularly concerned about the girl's condition. Compared to whether the girl would wake up or not, he was more concerned about the news of the Master of the Galaxy, the former Overlord. If they could return, it would be a guarantee for the safety of the Milky Way galaxy. You should know, the universe's secret realm was still within the Milky Way galaxy. With the War Goddess in the lead, the Ocean Arch and the other great emperors had been on guard. The Beast Emperor, Dong Wang, had used his chessboard as a seal. Try your best to seal the exit of the secret realm. Most of the God Realm's members were stationed there. If an outsider appeared, they'd notify Yi Zichen immediately. The connection between the Master of the Galaxy and me is unilateral. Elder Lin sat on the sofa and stared at the young lady's room on the 2nd floor. If he doesn't take the initiative to contact me, I can't advise him. If we want to know about the Master of the Galaxy, we can only wait for Miss Shea to wake up. Zichen. At this moment, Su Yin walked out of her room on the 2nd floor. Elder Lin, who was downstairs, instantly stood up. Yi Zichen also looked over. The person inside is awake. He wants to see you. See me? Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown. Miss Shea is awake. Elder Lin leaped up to the 2nd floor, but Su Yin reached out and stopped him. Elder Lin, she said she wants to see the leader here, and she'll only see the leader here. In Su Yin's heart, Yi Zichen was without a doubt their leader. When Elder Lin heard this, he was startled for a moment before he slowly took 2 steps back. He acknowledged Yi Zichen's position as leader. I'll go take a look. Yi Zichen walked past Elder Lin and Su Yin into the room. In the room, the girl stood by the window and looked outside. The moment he entered the room, the door closed abruptly. Yi Zichen glanced back. This place is really beautiful. I haven't seen such a beautiful world in a long time. Yi Zichen didn't know how to respond. You're looking for me? If you're the leader here, then I'm looking for you. The girl turned around and looked Yi Zichen up and down. Human? Yi Zichen was confused. Disappointment could be seen in her eyes. Then, the girl by the window instantly appeared in front of Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen's pupils constricted despite himself. Enemy? Didn't Elder Lin know this person? Why did she attack? There was no time for Yi Zichen to think about it. Dong! Yi Zichen dodged while the girl kicked the wall of the room. His attack had failed. The girl charged towards Yi Zichen once again. So fast. The room wasn't big to begin with, so the girl attacked even more frequently. About 10 seconds later, Yi Zichen, who was just about to counterattack, subconsciously stopped as well. What do you want? Why don't you fight back? The girl tilted her head and smiled. Yi Zichen remained silent. Chapter 2044. Red Packet Server, Chapter 2039. Everyone gathered, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 2045. Red Packet Server, Chapter 2040. The gap in cognitive ability, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 2046. Red Packet Server, Chapter 2041. The level of the universe, secret realm, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 2047. Red Packet Super, Chapter 2042. Follow me, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update.